The chair is not expecting a lot of heat from the minutes part. Not a lot of debate there.
Well, we could if you.
Yeah.
We haven't.
We're going to talk about the X Factor, Patrick?
That's exactly. I've been waiting to do it just because we've never done it. We've never talked about the minutes. So.
All right. Well, let's call the meeting to order. We're a couple of minutes behind schedule. Just waiting for Councillor Nagel to join. We crossed paths or crossed wires, I guess, with the potential of being able to meet in person. And while I was super excited to be able to do that, obviously we're not. There's this little hurdle called legislation that's in our way, which potentially, hopefully, with the announcement of stage 2, there will be some continued relaxations of restrictions. But the one that we're really up against right now is we are able to meet publicly, like together as a group, but when there's all of council and all of administration together, that is deemed a public meeting, and then we must allow public to attend in person as well. So we're not quite ready to do that at the Ranch House until we get the ECC and all the guidelines in place, or as I said earlier, the guidelines are changed a little bit. Then we have to continue to do things this way. So hopefully this is our last meeting like this, and the next time we're streaming out to people via the chambers, not Microsoft Teams. So that's and I apologize for getting everybody whipped up and all excited about it. I was probably the most excited to be in council chambers, and then, legislation. And I did check in with municipal affairs. Other communities were trying to do the same thing, and we're all getting the same answer. No. Unless you're able to open up your facility, so. Okay, that's the call to order in my preamble. Adoption of the agenda. I'm trying to take as long as I can to get Councillor Nagel onto the queue here. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Fedayko. I can see everybody. All those in favor? It's just so much easier. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. And adoption of the previous minutes. Councillor Wilson, did you want to chat in length about the minutes?
I had a good look over those, and I would move to adopt the previous minutes.
Okay, thank you for that. All those in favor of adopting the minutes of our previous meeting? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving into delegations, we don't have any. And bylaws. Going to bylaws, we're at Bylaw 08-2020, the annual tax rate bylaw. Catherine, you're here to present the tax rate?
I am. So, are you ready, or shall I drag out my introduction a little bit?
I believe Councillor Nagel will join us here shortly, so.
Okay.
In the essence of everyone else's time, we'll carry on.
Okay, so I have a presentation that I'll share with you. All right, hopefully that works.
Looks good so far.
Okay. All right, so Bylaw 08-2020, annual tax rate bylaw. The next screen is going to be a little scary. It's going to be all the recommendations. It just looks scary. It's just a matter of how we get through 3 readings in one setting.
Okay, and Councillor Nagel's with us too, so everybody's on board.
Good timing.
Yeah.
All right, so we're just recommending first, second, consent to go to unanimous consent to go to third and final reading, and then final reading. So a little bit of background for you. So each year council actually must set the annual tax rates in order to collect the property taxes that are needed for us to provide the services and complete the projects that we have in our budget. We also need to collect education taxes that are set by the province, as well as requisitions for the Rocky View Foundation, which is to support seniors housing options, as well as the province does our assessment of industrial properties, so they send us a requisition for the cost for them to do that assessment work, and we need to collect that back from the applicable industrial properties. This year, as we discussed at previous council meeting, we're setting a tax due date of September the 30th, with the idea being normally it was June the 30th, but to give people an opportunity, a little bit more time to pay their taxes. As well, because the province changed the due dates for the education portion of the non-residential taxes, all of that we settled on as September 30th due date. So the proposed bylaw before you this evening falls in line with the September 30th due date. So here's my pie analogy. So we have different types of pie that we have to collect. And so we have 4 different pies that we collect as part of our taxes. We collect municipal pie, we collect the education pie, the seniors foundation pie, and that designated industrial property pie. So of the 4 pies, municipal taxes per the 2020 approved budget is 28.6 million, provincial education taxes of 15.1, Seniors Foundation of $202,000, and the industrial property assessment of $3,600. So of the total, all the pies, if we mash them all together into one pie, and we figured out what portion of that great big mashed up pie goes to what, you can see that of the total pie, 65% comes to our municipality for us to do the services. So when someone's looking at the bottom line of their tax bill, 34% of that bill goes to the province to support education. 1% goes to the Seniors Foundation, to Rocky View, as well as a bit for that industrial property. So as you can see, we don't get the whole thing. We're working with 65% of it. So now what do we do? So once we figured out each pie, we have to figure out how to slice up the pie. And each year, the size of the pies change, but we still have 4 pies we have to divide up. But each year, we have to divide it up using the assessment data that we have, that Gail Butts and her team put together every year, and we sent out the tax notices this year in January with the appeal deadline of March 30th. However, not every slice is created equally. So you can see that different slices of pie are different sizes. So one of the first things we have to do when we're splitting up the pie, the municipal tax pie, we have to figure out how much is going to be paid by the residential taxpayers and how much of the pie will go to the non-residential taxpayers. So the tax rate before you for consideration this evening has a split of 85% of the pie goes to residential taxpayers, 15% to our non-residential taxpayers, and this is the same split that we used in 2018 as well as 2019. So it didn't make any changes for 2020. So once we figured out the residential part of the municipal pie and the non-residential portion of the municipal pie, then we use the respective assessments to divvy up that pie. And that's how we end up figuring out how much each taxpayer gets on their tax bill. So to give you a little bit of information about the assessments this year, total taxable assessments for 2020 is $5.7 billion. And that's made up of just over $5 billion in residential assessment and $650 million in non-residential assessment. So as you can see, we have 88% residential, 12% non-residential. Taxable assessment, how did it increase over 2019? So if you look at the residential assessment, it increased by 0.63%, and the non-residential increased by 5.1%. So those percentages are actually a combination of growth, meaning new properties that weren't assessed last year, and changes in the market value. So we did have growth, but what's happened is our assessment for existing properties has gone down year over year. And I'll show that to you in the next slide. So as you can see, for municipal taxes, every year we calculate out what the average municipal property's assessment is for residential. So in 2019, the average residential property was just shy of $480,000, and now we're down to just over $470,000. So that had an impact on that percentage increase. So yes, we had growth, but then we had a decrease in the residential assessed value. So if we look at that and we figure out, based on the proposed tax rates for municipal taxes in the bylaw that's attached to your report, multiply that out by the average assessment and comparing what the average residential tax property would have paid in 2019 compared to 2020, you can see that it's $23 per year more than it was in 2019, or 1.02% more. Just remember, though, that this is an average, so there will be properties that are above and properties that are below, but this is just sort of an indication to you of how that tax dollar or that tax bill has changed for municipal taxes from 2019 to 2020. So another thing that we did is we took a look at some of the surrounding communities and comparator communities to take a look to see if we had the same $470,000 residential property, and that was the assessed value in each of a number of communities, what would their top tax dollars be? So some municipalities have already set their 2020 tax rates, and some of them have not, or at least they didn't have them posted where I could find them. So in the second column under year, that's why we talk about I have 2020 or 2019. So take the municipal tax rate, multiply it by the 470,000, and these are the tax dollars in the last column that one would pay in each of those communities. So as you can see, Cochrane is middle of the road. Rocky View County is by far the lowest, and by far the highest is Leduc. So that gives you an idea of the comparison of what the taxes would be for municipal taxes in each of those communities. The other thing we took a look at was comparing our non-residential tax rates. So we don't figure out an average non-residential because it's all over the map. It all depends on how many bigger non-residential and how many smaller. So basically what we did is we just compared what the tax rate is between each of the communities. And so Cochrane is by far the lowest. So taking all of those numbers in the last column, that's taking Cochrane's tax rate and what percentage higher is each of those other communities. And it's actually, Calgary's like 140%, even though they've made adjustments to put more on the residential property owners. So all of that to say, when we do that split of 85 for residential and 15% for non-residential, I know it's important to us to motivate businesses to come be in Cochrane, but we're giving them a big motivation. So there might be some room in future years to look at changing that split, but I thought this year was not the year to do that. So that's why I had left it at the 85-15, but I thought it was important to give you this updated information about that. So that's municipal taxes. Another component of the tax bill is the education taxes. So I don't know if you recall or not, but in 2019, the province had not sent us their requisition in time for us to set the tax rates, and we actually did not get the amount of education taxes that they wanted to collect from us until late in the fall. So we had to guess as to how much in education taxes we thought we were going to need in 2019. And so I over-guessed for our residential taxpayers, and I slightly under-guessed for our non-residential taxpayers. So that's a little bit of good news, because then that means we collect less in 2020 from the residential and just slightly more from the non-residential taxpayers to fix that estimate. So I overestimated the 2019 education taxes for our residential taxpayers by just over $124,000, and I underestimated by $1,001 for our non-residential. So we were pretty close, but we do have to make that adjustment in 2020. So what does the 2020 education taxes look like from the province? Well, they did send us their actual bill this year instead of having to estimate it. And I don't know if you recall in the news that they had mentioned that they were going to keep the total amount of education taxes that they were going to collect across the province the same due to COVID. However, each municipality's taxable assessment changes from year to year. So how their education pie gets split up between the municipalities is based on each municipality's taxable assessment, and our taxable assessment went up. So we get a bigger part of that pie. So how much bigger? It's $471,000 more than it was in 2019. So part of that's offset by that overestimate. So things aren't terrible for education taxes. So we have to pay $470,000 more in education taxes this year. What about the Rocky View Foundation? Well, they've sent us a bill that's actually $1,900 less than it was in 2019, and that's to support our senior housing options. So all of that to say, what is the total impact on someone's tax bill? So if you are the average residential property assessed at $470,100, there's that $23 for the municipal that was in an earlier slide. But you can see for that residential taxpayer, your education taxes have gone down by $18. That's per year, leaving you with $5 per year more for your total tax bill with the current tax rate when you factor in the education taxes. So another component of everything is annexed properties. So there were a number of properties that we annexed from Rocky View County, and as part of the annexation is an agreement where for a period of time, the agreement was that those properties would continue to pay taxes at the Rocky View County tax rates. 30 of those properties, the agreement ended in 2019, so that was the last year for 30 properties, but there are 23 properties remaining. So the 23 properties that are taxed at the Rocky View County rate, that'll continue with 2024 being the last year. And if those properties have been taxed at the town of Cochrane rate, we would have collected $52,000 more from those taxpayers than what we actually are, because the Rocky View County rates are lower than ours, which for the rest of Rocky View might make sense because they traditionally provide less services than an urban center does, such as the town of Cochrane. So mailing, if we set the tax rates tonight, then it's all set up and ready to go so that we can mail the notices on June the 22nd. So what are the recommendations? First, second, unanimous consent, and third. Plan for the recommendations, and I welcome any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you for that. Good high analogy. Councillor Reid, do you have a request to make a motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to motion the first option, if I could, please, and thank Catherine for all of her great work. I really love the way you quickly summarized that, so that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so that's first reading, Councillor Reid. Anyone opposed to giving first reading? No, that carries. Councillor Reid, did you want to carry on with second reading?
Payment on your policy.
Yes, could I move second reading of that motion, please?
Okay, do you have any comments or debate at this time, or?
I don't.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Flowers, go ahead.
Yes, Catherine, thank you so much for that presentation. It's complicated stuff and you make it really make sense to us. Regarding the Rocky View Foundation, I did ask the CAO about that, and she said that it's based with Rocky View County and Airdrie, that they had significant increases in their assessments over 2019. So their portion of the requisition increased where it allowed ours to decrease.
So that's great news.
For this year, anyway. And I just wanted to say again that it makes a lot of sense and that you did an amazing job of putting this all together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flowers. Councillor Padeco, comment?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to be opposed to this only because of the fact that I was not in favor of funding 1.5 mil to SLS FSC 2 weeks ago, so it would be kind of hypocritical of me, I think, at this point to say that all of a sudden I'm in favor of increasing taxes. I did a big spiel about how I feel that taxes should be reduced, and whether or not, you know what, kind of even looking at some of council's facial expressions, whether or not it's $5 or not, I don't think that is up to us to be able to decide what is fair or what is not fair. So I will be
Well, I think we lost you at your last 10 seconds.
at the last 10 seconds. I just want to say thank you to Catherine for doing all that she did for this. I do appreciate the work. It would just be hypocritical of me to stand up and say that I approve this at this point after what I said a couple weeks ago.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wilson?
Hi, yeah, thank you. I was interested to see that at least the narrative I took from the one slide there was that it's cheaper to live in Airdrie or Calgary based on their residential tax rates. And I just, as a question, Catherine, I assume that's due to their increasing tax splits where they have a much larger non-residential section than we have. And I just wanted to know, is it both that they have a larger business community, or is it just the rate itself, or is it a bit of both that's creating that gigantic split?
No, it's how they divvy it up. So it's all relative. So when I look at the percentages, I'm looking at what percentage of the taxes go to residential and what percentage goes to non-residential. One of the factors in is the assessment for sure. But if you just look at the rate itself, and you can see that our non-residential rate is quite a bit lower, which means then that our residential rate is higher. So if we're looking for an opportunity to reduce residential taxes, that would be a place that I would recommend starting, is looking at that split. What is a split that will still attract businesses to the town of Cochrane, but also allow us some opportunity to lower the residential taxes?
And so there's two sides to that then. One is the rate that you're talking about, which would be something to discuss upcoming, I imagine, but something that's probably unanimous amongst council would be to also just grow our non-residential base as well. I understand would also improve that split, just adding more businesses to the...
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. I also voted alongside Councillor Federico on our last vote to do with our sports center. I'm going to vote in favor of this simply because we had our moment there, and I think we've done a good job now that after that decision was made. And thank you, Catherine, for the presentation. It looks good to me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, the 1.5 million is not going to be felt on this year's tax. It'll be felt on next year's tax, if the idea is to start paying back that loan to ourselves next year.
That's correct.
Right. So, yeah, I can support this budget. I think we're in a great position that it's only $5 over the entire year to kind of get us through COVID and to still deal with, one of the most valued and desirable communities in the country to live in. So I think our budget's in a good spot for that. I will definitely be going into next year's budget with a different take on things, though, because I don't think we should have been building a $1.5 billion would be terrible. Million's bad enough. Extra bill to the taxpayers next year. So, but overall, this is a good budget, and it has my support.
Okay. Any other comments on the budget? Okay, I would just agree, Councillor McFadden. I think this is a good budget. We've, I think, found a balance between being sensitive to what's going on around us and with the pandemic. And obviously, the point I wanted to make was to be clear to residents that this isn't the budget that we talked about a year ago. This is a much different budget with a lot of changes in it to accommodate different staffing levels, different service levels, different responses to the pandemic, obviously. And then to come out with the same tax rate at the end of that, I think is a good feat by Catherine and your team and all of the senior leadership team. So thank you for that work. There's obviously a lot of the projects that are included in this budget. Obviously, council is feeling like this is a great time. We're talking about our priorities later in the agenda, but we're not stopping. We're moving forward with the important infrastructure projects that we have highlighted already and that everybody obviously in the community is waiting for. To be able to do that for $5 this year increase, mind you, is I think a good balance between being sensitive to what's going on, but also achieving a lot of the goals that we had outlined in a lot of what we campaigned on, each of us. So I wanted to thank you for that. I see some others are queuing up for comments and questions. Councillor Federico, you have another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that I do understand obviously that the 1.5 mil doesn't impact this budget, but I do really think that, from a residential standpoint, that we should have done or have did whatever we could in our power to lower that down to 1%. And that is why I'm sticking on the opposition, not going forward. It's that I feel that residents expected us to probably step in and do what we could to reduce that. And as great as it is to move forward, I think that there's so many questions when it comes to moving forward that I necessarily can't support what that looks like. So that is why I'm sticking to the opposition side of that decision.
Okay. Now is the time if you have changes that you want to make that you think would be lesser. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, sorry, just a question about our overall budget, and I'm just looking for it here quickly. What is our total budget for the year? I mean, I know we've settled on the tax rate. What's our total operations and capital budget for the year?
So we have expenditures of $59.3 million. And then of the $59.3 million, $28,665,000 and change would be paid for from property taxes. The rest of it is a combination of grants and draws from reserves and user fees.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to keep that in context that, the municipality we're running is pretty much a $60 million service center. So, overall I am comfortable with where we've landed. It's a tricky time for everyone, but at a $5 increase, that's essentially 0%. And we're both dealing with the COVID and preparing for the future. And that's the balance that's been really tricky for everybody to hit. But I think overall I can agree with this one. So good job. Thank you, Catherine.
Councillor Federico?
Yeah, last comment that I make, I could make an amendment to the bylaw, but it looks like everybody else is in support, so I think it would be a waste of time to all of a sudden decide to come forward with something else or an amendment, so that's why I'm not necessarily suggesting anything. It looks like it's going to pass, so I will not bring forward an amendment at this time, just not to waste time.
Okay. Thanks for that. Any other comments or debates? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those, I guess we're going to have to go through. Councillor Wilson, are you opposed or in favor?
I'm in favor of the motion.
Okay. Councillor McFadden?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Federico?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Flowers?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Reid?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Nagel?
I'm in favor.
And I am also in favor, so that carries. So now we'll move on to unanimous consent. So we would need obviously unanimous consent to get third and final reading tonight. So Councillor Reid, do you want to carry on or someone? Okay.
Yeah, I will move that unanimous consent for the third and final reading.
Okay, are you in favor or opposed?
I'm in favor.
Okay, Councillor Wilson?
In favor.
Councillor McFadden?
I'm in favor.
Councillor Federico?
I'm not going to have much choice, so I'm in favor.
Councillor Flowers?
In favor.
Councillor Nagel?
In favor.
And I'm in favor, so that carries. We have unanimous consent. Third and final reading. Councillor Reid, do you want to carry on with all four?
Sure. I will move third and final reading. And I'm in favor.
Okay. Councillor Nagel?
In favor.
Councillor Federico?
In favor.
Councillor Flowers?
In favor.
Councillor McFadden?
In favor.
Councillor Wilson?
In favor.
And I'm in favor, so that carries. Thank you, Catherine. Ms. Van Kynpema. I just like to say it because I know how to now. Thank you for all your work. And thank you to the department and the senior leadership team for all the work they put into this. I know it's been obviously extraordinary times. It's called for extraordinary measures on your part, so thank you all for that.
Thank you.
I almost hung up.
No.
Okay, moving along, where are we? Go to screen 3 here. The bylaw 09-2020 annual community. Oh, you're still here, Catherine. Obviously, community revitalization levy tax rate bylaw. Take it away.
All right, we'll share again. Okay, so bylaw 09-2020 annual CRL tax bylaw. So same thing as we did before. We have 4 things to do. So we'll go around the circle 4 times again. And so for first, second, third reading. So overview. This is for those properties that are in our community revitalization zone. It's a levy and it's an agreement, a regulation with the province that allows us to collect the education portion of the taxes, but instead of remitting it to the province, we get to put it into reserve to spend on projects that will revitalize the downtown area. So if we go ahead and pass this bylaw, then we would collect just shy of $1.4 million in 2020 to go towards that reserve. And the balance of the reserve at the end of 2019 is about $2.6 million. So this would bring it up to $4 million. An example of a project that we're funding from the CRL reserve is the downtown pedestrian crossing, which is in our budget. So that's why we collect the dollars. And that concludes the presentation on this one. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. So obviously this is the same tax rate bylaw for the CRL we pass every year, putting the funds in the same place for uses on the appropriate amendments to the or improvements to downtown like that you highlighted. Thank you. Anyone for, we're doing this again, first, second, unanimous, and third, if everybody's in favor of that. So any takers on first reading? Councillor McFadden, okay. All those in favor, I think, well, I can't see everyone, so we'll have to go through again. Councillor McFadden, are you in favor of first reading?
I am.
You are, okay. Making a new list. Councillor Wilson.
In favor?
Councillor Flowers.
In favor?
Councillor Federico.
In favor?
Councillor Reed.
In favor?
Councillor Nagel.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so that passes. So second reading. Councillor McFadden, we'll just carry on with the theme.
I so move.
And you're in favor? Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Wilson?
I was hoping to ask a question in the second reading here. Is this appropriate time? Or? Yeah, okay. Okay, good. Catherine, I was just looking at the tax rate with our CRL, and it appears to be much different, obviously, than our previous bylaw we were talking about.
Actually, it's not. If you look at the annual tax rate bylaw, we have a number of sections. There's the municipal tax, the education tax, the senior foundation. If you add those numbers together and you look at the bottom of the annual tax rate, it gives you a total tax mill rate, and that's the one that should be in the CRL bylaw.
Oh, I understand. Okay. And so what we're talking about right now is the same non-residential portion that we were talking about in the previous.
And there is a few residential properties as well. So we
Right.
have a CRL residential rate and a CRL non-residential rate, and those should be equivalent to what we just passed in the annual tax rate bylaw.
It was the one portion of the slides where we were looking at our comparisons between other municipalities and our non-residential tax rate being so much different in this portion, but I'm seeing that wrong, and it's just because the education isn't added in. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, so the slide in the previous presentation that we're looking at when we're comparing it to our other municipalities, that was just the municipal portion, whereas the CRL rate includes the education, municipal, and the Rocky View Foundation. It's an all-in rate.
Understood. Okay, thank you. And to carry on, we were voting on the second reading, so.
Well, that's my bad, Councillor Wilson. I should have asked if there were any questions or comments on second reading, so I'll do so now. Is there anyone else that has questions on the CRL tax rate? Okay, not seeing any. Councillor Wilson, are you in favor or opposed to the?
I'm in favor. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flowers,
I'm in favor.
Councillor Federico,
In favor?
Councillor Reid,
In favor?
Councillor Nagel,
In favor?
and I'm in favor. So that's second reading. You want to carry on with unanimous consent, Councillor McFadden?
I move unanimous consent.
And you're in favor.
I'm
Councillor
in
Wilson,
In favor, thank you.
Councillor Federico,
In favor?
Councillor Flowers,
In favor?
Councillor Reid,
In favor?
Councillor Nagel,
In favor?
and I'm in favor. And now we'll move on to third and final reading. It's a super clumsy in person. It's extraordinarily clumsy virtually. Councillor McFadden, do you want to move third and final reading? Yeah.
I do, and I'm in support, just to save
Oh,
time.
great. Thank you for that. I didn't have to ask. Councillor Wilson,
In favor. Support.
Councillor Federico,
In support?
Councillor Flowers,
In favor?
Councillor Reid,
In favor?
Councillor Nagel.
In favor?
Bark once for in favor, and I'm in favor as well. So that carries. Okay. Now we'll move on to Bylaw 11, Community Revitalization Levy Supplementary Tax. Catherine.
All right. Sorry, just trying to get back up. There we go. All right, supplementary tax bylaw for CRL. So just like we have a supplementary tax bylaw for our regular taxes, we have one for the CRL properties. So we're looking for first, second, unanimous to go to third, as well as third reading on this one as well, and questions. So to give you the background, basically all we do is it says set the supplementary CRL tax rate at the same rate as what we just finished passing in the CRL regular tax rate bylaw. So we have to pass the supplementary one, otherwise we won't be able to collect supplementary taxes. And what do I mean by supplementary taxes? Those are for properties who complete or were under construction at the end of last year, and they complete their construction prior to October 1st of this year. We send them a supplementary tax bill. So this allows us to charge those taxes if the property is in the CRL zone. And I, again, would welcome any questions.
Okay, we go again. First, second, unanimous. Let's pick on someone else. Does someone else want to give first reading? Councillor Flowers, go ahead.
Sorry, my mic is taking a long time to shut up, go on and off. I'd like to move first reading.
Okay, you're a little bit glitchy there, but I got the extent of it. You're passing, or you're making motion for first reading, and you're in favor.
Yes.
So now we've changed the order. So, Councillor Nagel, are you in favor of first reading?
I'm in favor. Can you hear me?
Yes, actually, we can see everyone.
Yeah, I had to get the camera set up. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's fine. So, all those in favor of first reading? Councillor McFadden, I can't quite see your hand. There it is. Okay. Yeah, that is way easier. Councillor Flower, do you want to carry on the second reading?
Yes, I'll move the second reading.
And are there any questions? No? No. Okay. Call the question. All those in favor of second reading?
I had a quick question.
Oh.
Sorry, trying to type it into our chat here.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Correct me, we have a few overlapping agenda items tonight. One upcoming is our strategic priorities, so if it's best served there, I'll save it.
Okay.
You want to just let me know, but I'm looking at, am I glitching? Can we hear me?
I can. I think someone's got an open mic somewhere. We can just close them down. Try that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. That's better, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in the breakdown of the allocation of the funds for the CRL, which is what we're currently talking about, there's an eventual $13 million being allocated, at least is the slide I'm looking at right now.
1.39, so 1.4 in this year.
Right, I'm looking at the overall, it's over a period of time that we get to 13 million.
Yep.
Right, and so there's 4 different projects that are talked about here, a pedestrian crossing, an art center, a shared parking facility, and a public space improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the allocations of those funds, and I don't know if that's best to talk about now or in the strategic priorities agenda item coming later.
Yeah, I think it would be best in the priorities, because and correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, but all we're doing here is setting the money aside. The priorities talks about how we allocate, and then obviously then follow through with a vote on each of those individually to allocate the funds even further.
Yeah, and that comes up when we're allocating for budget time, or we're talking about a project budget, and we're proposing to fund it from the CRL. That's the time.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to gum us up. Let's keep voting here.
No, it's all good. Good to know all of these things as we go. Okay, so second reading carried anyway. And now we need a motion, Councillor Flowers, for unanimous consent for third and final.
Yes, I have unanimous consent on this item.
Okay, all those in favor of unanimous consent? Carries unanimously, thank you. And third and final reading, Councillor Flowers?
Yeah, I move third and final reading of this item.
All those in favor? Carries. 5E, Bylaw 19, 2020. Back to you, Ms. Van Kynema.
All right, here we go again. All right, so Bylaw 19, 2020, the tax penalty bylaw amendment. So again, we have to do the first, second, unanimous, third thing again. So to give you some background, in response to the impacts that COVID-19 has had, the province decided to delay the collection of the education taxes for the non-residential taxpayers. And as a result, we had conversations earlier this year, and we said, you know what, well, let's delay everybody's taxes to the September 30th rather than June 30th. One of the consequences of that is that in our current tax penalty bylaw, we are to apply a penalty on July the 1st. The problem is that we're not having taxes collected until September the 30th. So we need to make an amendment so we don't collect the July 1st penalty. And so a little bit more background for you. So the current tax penalty bylaw is 08/2008. And in there, it says that annual taxes are due June the 30th. The penalties are imposed July 1st and October 1st. And the other thing is that what we've come across when people are paying with online banking, if you pay at online banking on the due date, it takes a day or two for the bank to process. So what ends up happening is you may have thinks you have paid it on time, but the bank says you did not. And then we have some problems with applying the penalties. So what we'd like to do this year is we'd like to educate those who pay their property taxes using online banking to make sure that they give a couple of days of processing time. And so ahead of that education campaign this year, what we'd like to do is give everybody a bit of a grace period. So rather than applying the penalty the day after the due date, which this year is September the 30th, we're proposing that October 1st is the penalty date, so we leave that alone, but that administratively we wouldn't apply it till October the 5th. This gives time for that online banking notification to come through, And then that way our staff doesn't apply a bunch of penalties and then turn around and have a bunch of phone conversations and have to reverse those penalties. So we don't want to do that forever and ever, but we think that this year it would be good to provide some more education about that and to give people a bit of a grace period. So what are some of the summaries of the amendments is to change the due date, eliminate the July 1st penalty, clarify the administrative application of the October 1st penalty for it to be on October the 5th, and clarify that the amendment is for the 2020 year only, and that the amendment would expire at the end of 2020. So we'd go back to our old bylaw for the purposes of 2021 and on.
Well, I'm not sure if we're back up yet or not.
So the command ship had problems?
I think the stream dropped, the live stream.
Oh,
And then when it drops, we don't meet the legislation, so
maybe that's Patrick's XY factor.
XY. Yeah. Oh, we're live again. Okay. Excellent. All right, so we were at tax penalty bylaw amendment, bylaw 19, and Councillor Padeco, you had a question of Ms. Van Pankema. I hope she's back in here. There we go. Yep. Go ahead.
Yes, Catherine, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but have we had a lot of questions from people in the community asking about deferring their taxes, or do we have an actual number of how many people have come forward to ask that question?
We actually haven't had very many, and one indicator of that for us also is the number of people who perhaps were on the TIP program and who've asked to be withdrawn. And there's actually, relatively speaking, been very few people who have done that. I'm sure once the bill comes and September 30th comes a little closer, and if people's financial situation remains unchanged from it was right now or earlier this year, then we may see more of that. But right now we haven't had a strong indication that there's a lot of challenges for people.
I guess, well, you know, I can certainly appreciate that. I guess, you know, if you can at least keep us in the know as to how many people come forward in the future asking those questions once they get their bill, that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we certainly will probably end up having to consider is an opportunity. The province has encouraged municipalities to enter into tax payment agreements with those taxpayers who perhaps can't pay their taxes. So that is something that actually has to be approved by council. So you will definitely have an indication of those who will be challenged and will be looking for council to help them out.
Okay. Any other questions on the tax rate penalty bylaw amendment for this calendar year only? No? I believe we were on second reading. I think we passed second reading. I've got a score sheet going here, but I can't recall which bylaw. I've given quite a few ticks in my columns here. So, okay, I'm getting an update. I need to call the question on the second reading again. All those in favor of second reading? And that carries. Thank you. Unanimous consent and third and final. Councillor Wilson, I believe this was your...
Yep.
Was it? Or it doesn't matter.
I'll move third reading for, where are we here? I just lost it.
Unanimous.
Bylaw 19, 2020. I'll move third reading, please.
Unanimous consent to move to third reading.
Unanimous consent, third reading, yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Carries. And third and final reading?
I would like to move third and final reading of Bylaw 19, 2020, the tax penalty bylaw amendment.
All those in favor? Great, thank you, that carries. Moving out of bylaws and crazy motions of first, second, unanimous, and third readings to the business section of our agenda tonight, which is 6A, a Safety Codes Department Overview. I believe Mr. Justin Perrin is joining us from our team.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing me to make this presentation tonight. If you don't know me, my name is Justin. I'm the manager of the Safety Codes Department, and today the presentation will be on the overview of our department. Just share my screen.
It always takes a couple
Can you
minutes.
guys see that okay?
It's coming up.
Okay,
There it is, yep.
perfect. Right. So just a little bit of an overview for the table of contents for this this presentation. So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a history of the safety codes, as what it means provincially, as well as what it means for the town of Cochrane. I'll give you guys a brief overview on what safety codes officers are. I myself is a building inspector. I want to put note on a bunch of notable successes that our department has had over the last few years. I'm also going to throw in a little bit of some charts in respect to revenue, permits, number of permits issued, as well as the number of inspections our team does on an annual basis. And just a little bit of a forward-thinking future of the department and where we hope to take it in the coming years. So as far as the history is concerned, the government of Alberta established the Safety Codes Council in 1993, and they basically made this so that municipalities become accredited, and then they can manage their own safety codes officers and issue permits, inspect the permits, and make sure work is compliant. The town itself has been accredited since 1995, so just 2 years after the regulations came into effect in the province. So when it comes to safety codes officers, so we have a team of 4 safety codes officers currently. Myself, a building inspector or safety codes officer, however you want to call it. I'm a journeyman red seal carpenter by trade and an architectural technologist as well. We have another building SEO, Adam Karpa, but Adam's kind of a special case. He is a building inspector as well as our plumbing and gas inspector. We also have Shane. Shane comes from, he's our newest addition to our team. He's our electrical safety codes officer. He comes with a wealth of knowledge from the city of Calgary as well. He's a master electrician. And our fourth one, yes.
Justin?
Yeah.
We've lost your presentation.
Oh, we lost the screen. Sorry.
Oh, you're sharing the...
The wrong screen.
Yeah.
There. Is that better? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Sorry. So basically, we're our last inspector, Jason. He just recently got his certification as a building SEO. Jason's a journeyman carpenter as well. I forgot to mention that Adam is a red seal journeyman plumber and gas fitter. So what we do as inspectors is we inspect the installation, the construction of projects within the municipality. So the town of Cochrane is an accredited municipality that allows us to issue permits. We work very close with citizens, the community members, businesses, building owners, contractors, as well as internal stakeholders, just to make sure that all the provincial codes are met within the province. So as far as the notable successes, there was a few that I wanted to cover, and I wanted to showcase it to you, Mr. Mayor, and as well as councillors. I just want to make sure that we're showing that there's a lot of positives out of this, and with everything going on in the world and stuff like that, I think we're set up quite well with our department. So out of all of our safety codes officers in staff, those 4 employees, including myself, We have over 72 years of certified trade, technologist, and inspector experience combined. So we are a wealth of knowledge in respect to our department. Since 2016, we've a totally digital permitting issuance process, and we've definitely reduced our permit issuance times 86% from about 14 plus business days to within a week, 1 to 2 days as the quickest. In respect to our internalizing, because we went internal and we've hired all internal inspectors with the town of Cochrane, we have drastically reduced our contract service in respect to how much of the permit revenues come into the town and stay within the town. So we reduced that by about 86%, as you can see, from about $600,000 down to about $70,000 per year. A little note for 2019, we ended up with a surplus revenue of roughly $700,000. So our big thing with myself and our team is we always want to do a customer first perspective. So we're always trying to work with customers and make sure that they understand all the requirements, the codes, building codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes. They can get very, very detailed, and we can try and work these requirements out with citizens as well as internal stakeholders to make sure that everyone's on the right track. We kind of put ourselves in their shoes to make sure that we're discussing it and outlining the details to the best of our abilities. So we also, as inspectors and safety codes officers, we participate in a lot of provincial committees. Myself, I sit on the Calgary Build Technical Committee. I know our other SCOs are always working with other inspectors within the province as well as at a provincial level, just to make sure that we're promoting the safety code system, but as well as that we're always making sure that we're enforcing the same codes as the province is governed under the same codes. No matter what jurisdiction you're in Alberta, we fall under the exact same building codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes, and gas codes. And the last thing I wanted to make sure that was a notable success within our department was our response to the COVID situation. We do a lot of there's a lot of in-person work within our department, outside in the public, from in-face inspections, in-person inspections. So on March 17th, we implemented the digital or virtual inspection, not only to maintain the safety of our own citizens, but as well as our own staff, but without delaying projects, allowing people to move into new houses and allowing projects and large projects to keep moving forward within the town. So the next chart here, it's very, very detailed, but I just kind of want to give everyone the idea of the numbers and the stats in respect to when we've made those changes from 2016 on and what that means. So the biggest thing that we can see is that even though permit revenues have gone down a little bit in the last 4 years, our surplus revenue, the money that we've retained within the town, has gone up because we've made those drastic changes in contract service, and the reductions in contract service and building that internal capacity has helped a lot in respect to that. And it also increased the customer service level that we can achieve. We've achieved way better customer service with using internal town of Cochrane employees as inspectors instead of the contract service that the department relied on for years past 2016. But I would also like to really share this presentation with council, just so that everyone can have an idea and dive into the details a little more. It can get very, very detailed. These are just overviews, again, of permits issued, as well as the number of dwelling units issued over the last however many years I could get. But I mean, it shows the year-to-date for 2020, which was basically the end of May this year, but as far as years past. So again, I don't want to get too detailed into this, but I would love to share it with Mayor Janong and council to just have a better understanding of the amount of work, as well as just the pulse on the construction side within the town. The last slide here is just a bit of just the number of inspections that our team does on an annual basis, depending on, obviously, more permits get issued, more inspections are done. But it's just to give you an idea of that, the in-person inspections that take place in the town of Cochrane on an annual basis. So as far as where this department is going, we're always looking at process changes to identify efficiencies and to keep ensuring that our department provides the best service to our citizens as well as the internal stakeholders. We're always looking to continue to build our internal expertise. So if it's training, seminars, going out to sitting on committees, so trying to keep building that internal expertise so we can still provide the best service to our citizens and keep them on the right track and keep the town of Cochrane within compliance with the provincial codes. So another key element for us is continuing to embrace technology. We're always looking at using technology to our advantage. So two things that come to mind that we're working on is an interactive permit map with our GIS team. I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen the public-facing development services map, but we're hoping to get that. So all permits in town that are issued, building, electrical, plumbing, gas, are shown on a map that can show the status of those permits as well as using an online portal for our builders, as well as contractors and homeowners as well, so that permits can be issued through a portal, the inspections can be done through the portal as well, as far as sending receiving reports. But it's just to make this process even easier in regards to getting permits, getting inspections, and ensuring that your work is compliant with the provincial codes. I want to thank everyone, Mayor Janong and Council, for taking the time tonight to listen to my presentation, and I open it to questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perrin. That's a great presentation. That's a really good news story, obviously. And I'll look for a motion from council to receive your report as information, and we'll entertain any questions. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Is my mic turned on?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Perrin. I really appreciated the finding internal efficiencies part and delivering the increasing value to Cochrane taxpayers. It's something that this council looks for constantly, and it's very meaningful to us. So I appreciate that reduction in contracting fees that spoke to me. I just wanted to give you a chance when we spend a lot of time talking about our area structure plans, our neighborhood plans, some of our land use bylaw things, zero lot lines and setbacks. From a safety codes perspective, I was wondering if there was any thoughts on things we could be watching out for or doing differently when we're talking about new residential builds from a safety codes perspective. If you had anything to add?
I mean, the codes are very good about, taking into detail. So whatever the lot is given, the code, there's always a code article to determine the requirements of that lot. So regardless of the setbacks, anything like that, the code does take that into play. So there's always a requirement under the code, regardless of what setback or the lot coverage or anything like that, that the building codes and all that stuff will make that a requirement depending on what the setbacks are and everything like that.
Okay, thank you. My mind was along the lines of as we start to narrow some of our setbacks, if we were to do that, or as we move things around lot lines, there's obviously different materials that come into play for your safety codes, but there's no matter which way we go, there's always a solution from a safety codes perspective was what I'm getting.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Thanks for what you're doing.
Awesome. No problem.
And your department has circulated on all of these types of changes anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah, every development permit that comes through, it does circulate to our department for comment. Absolutely.
Okay. So when we get internal comments, that's one of them right from here. Yeah. Perfect.
You got it.
Councillor, did you have any other questions, Councillor Wilson? No? Okay. Councillor Flowers?
Great, thank you for your presentation. It's good to know that we have all this expertise and experience in-house that we can use. I'm just wondering about the technology when things go back to semi-normal, the new normal. Will you still be doing these checks online, or will you go back to doing them in person?
Well, that's a great question, Councillor. We will be going back to in-person, in-field inspections for sure. It's the most thorough way of completing these inspections within the town.
Great, I was hoping that was the case. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Federico?
Thanks, Justin, for the info. I just have one question when it comes to, say, something like zero lot lines. Obviously, we heard from the chief of fire last council meeting kind of about his concerns when it comes to zero lot lines. Even though, you just said that, yes, there are certain safety parameters that we'd have to put in place. At some point, obviously, if there is no second hull or Cochrane's growing to too big of an extent, I just want to make sure that there is a way for us to shut down, obviously, those lots if we're not in compliance, right? Because obviously you can state, the things that need to be put in place, but we also know that those factors change. And as Cochrane sprawls and grows out further and further, I just want to make sure that we're not missing that safety mark as well.
No, that's a great question. And I mean, we work very closely, not only internally with our guys, but as well as other jurisdictions, like municipalities, to make sure that because we're so new to these zero lot lines, and other municipalities, larger municipalities have been doing them for a number of years. Before any decisions are made, we're going to be working very closely with them to figure out what hardships they found. But there is, like I said, within the codes, when it comes to the situation on the lot, that it be zero lot lines, there's always a solution to make it not only meet the building codes, to make sure it satisfies the intent of all those building codes that are in place at a national level.
Perfect. So we could always make sure that we are critiquing whatever kind of bylaw we have in front of us, whether or not it's passed or not at that point, that we could all of a sudden put a stop to it if we need to. Obviously, we know that there's a second station kind of on the horizon, but obviously it depends on development of that area. So I just want to make sure that we are not looking at approving something that we are not going to be, that we're going to be getting ahead of ourselves without any sort of second plan or second phase, I guess, in motion for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be taking our time and making sure that we do our enough research and make sure that there is, ample testing to make sure that those safety measures are in place. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Thank you. I hate the delay in this entire process, but Justin, I wanted to compliment you and your team, and thank you so much for being able to come and share your good news story with us. That's the type of thing we'd always like to see is, as you have increasing workload, finding efficiencies, better customer service, and contributing to the revenue of the municipality. I mean, if every story could be like that, it'd be happy days all the time. But anyway, congratulations to your team, because I know none of those solutions were on the plate, and I know you worked hard to find those efficiencies. So I'm glad you're having a chance to kind of highlight, which is your department, which I think sometimes just gets taken for granted. So thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I thought that was a great summary. It took the words right out of my mouth. I guess the only thing I would add to that is I think it's really important that the public understand that all bylaws that come to council are vetted through every department that is affected in terms of stakeholders. So in the case of the zero lot line, as an example, that bylaw would obviously have been vetted by the fire department, by the bylaw department, by your department, and up to code. So, I want to be able to reassure the public that anything that comes forward to us has been through all of that process. So they clearly understand that this had a really good vetting before it gets to us. And I think that's important for the public to know. But I too would like to echo what's been said. When you can find efficiencies in a system, which Councillor Wilson has identified is one of the high priorities of this particular council, and you can do it in a way that customers or our clients are happy and save money. It's a win-win-win situation for all. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
And that's really the intent of the presentation tonight, was to highlight all of the hard work that Justin and his team have put together to get to this point. And Mr. Perrin, I mean, you've heard it from all of my colleagues tonight, the kudos across the board to a win-win-win. Everybody's talking about this is obviously how we would like all departments to operate if they could. And bring back a surplus to us every year that we could then pass on, obviously, to the taxpayer. But I wanted to highlight just one, and Councillor Wilson pointed it out right at the beginning, and that was the offsetting costs of contracting. My previous stint on council, we really had a lot of problems with this particular, with your role, with this department, because we couldn't find enough people to apply for the job. We were forced at that time to contract out. I really appreciate the efforts that you put in to get us back to, and I mean, we were there for a reason, and we've grown and we've changed, and your department has grown and evolved. And I really love the way that you're rolling with the punches, adapting, overcoming, evolving, innovating to produce the product that you have in front of us tonight. It's not lost on me, I guess is what I'm saying, that from where we've come from to where we are today, in 10 years, when that seems like a long time in municipal government, but that is a complete evolution of something from all external to all internal. That is commendable. So thank you so much to you and all of your team for all of the hard work, and I especially adapting throughout COVID, to be able to continue to produce. It's an important thing in our economy right now. The construction industry was deemed essential, and to be able to continue to provide services from the town of Cochrane is commendable. So thank you so much. And hats off.
Mayor Janaki.
Please pass on all of these.
Will do. Yeah.
We're recording this so you can play it back and you can pat everybody on the back.
Sounds good.
Councillor Fedeko, you have one more comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, it's not the fact that I don't think that any sort of development would come forward without being vetted properly, but Councillor Reid just said, I do obviously think that it would be vetted in the right areas. It's just my concern that we don't pass a bylaw that then gets passed off into the dust that nobody's relooking at for, some time, right? Because we all know that there are those concerns from those residents that say, wow, like that bylaw has been passed. And then we say, well, it's already been passed. It's already in motion. I just want to make sure that we're not forgetting something along the way. It's not to say that we would be passing something ineffectively or dangerously or without following the precautions. I just don't want it to be that way. That's not what I meant.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any comments? No? Okay. We don't have a motion on the floor yet to receive
I was
this.
just going to say, we forgot to make a motion. I'd move that we accept his information.
Okay. Last call for comments, questions, or concerns, or more kudos. All those in favor of receiving his information? And that carries. Thank you, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor Janaki, Council. Have a great night.
You too. Okay. 6B, request for subdivision extension. Mr. Weldon.
Good evening. Mayor Janung, I'm just going to share my screen here. Just give me 1 second, please. Yeah. Okay, just want to confirm everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, good evening, Council and Mayor Janung. I'm here to present to you for your consideration tonight a subdivision approval extension request, and it's specifically for 639 First Street West. So just as an outline, I'm going to give a bit of a legislative overview for the extension request. This is quite unique. These don't come to council very often. So I'll provide an overview of why it is in front of council here tonight. I will also provide some background on the subdivision itself. I'll talk about the appeal and the Municipal Government Board decision. I'll talk about a recent road closure application that is currently being worked through by Alberta Transportation. And then I'll finish with administration's recommendation. So, administration received a request for a subdivision approval extension, and that came from the applicants, which are HLG Limited, and that's Mr. Bruce Kendall. This is a result of a decision that was made by the Municipal Government Board, and that was on June 21st, 2019. The Municipal Government Board, or MGB, at that time had approved the subdivision subject to conditions. And as per the Municipal Government Act, and specifically Section 657, that approval or that decision is valid for 1 year from the date of decision, which makes it June 21st, 2020. If not all conditions have been satisfied by that time, the decision becomes void, and that's per the legislation. Now, there is the opportunity for an extension to be granted as per the legislation, but that jurisdiction or that authority actually lands with the Town of Cochrane Council, and it does not go back to the Municipal Government Board. So that is why the request is being brought to Town Council here tonight. It's actually in line with our provincial legislation. So I'll provide a little bit of the background of the subdivision itself. So the application was initially applied for in February 2018. And as I mentioned earlier, it's for 639 First Street West. And this is actually quite a unique location within the town. As you can see with the star on the map, it's at our extreme west end of our historic downtown. I'll just zoom in here a little bit. So you can see in the aerial photo, Highway 1A to the north. The yellow portion outlines approximately where the parcel is. You can see the slip ramp. If you can see my cursor there, you can see this is the slip ramp or slip road off of Highway into the historic downtown where it joins with First Street West. This is the CP tracks to the south. And then ultimately you have the parking area, which where we have the Choo-Choo pediatric dentistry and the Bright Path childcare over in this building here, just to get your bearings. So the application was to split this parcel, this 639, into two parcels, one smaller parcel and one larger parcel. And so the smaller parcel was about just 0.142 of an acre, and the larger parcel would be 0.345 of an acre. So this is the actual proposed subdivision. As you can see, proposed lot 2 is that smaller parcel. That's on the far west end of that parent parcel, and lot 1 being the remainder of that parcel after the subdivision. And this just shows you kind of in that context again of where this is located. Again, the slip ramp and First Street West. This is the parcel here. This 639 extends out here. And then just, I'm going to show a couple site photos here next, and just to show you the context of exactly where this parcel is, you can see this is that gravel as you come in off that slip road. Oh, I already advanced it. Oh, okay, they're going to bring it back, thanks. So you can see this is that gravel area off to when you come in heading east onto First Street off the slip road. This is that gravel area, that undeveloped gravel area. And you can see there's actually a little bit of a fragment parcel here left. This is that 635. So that fragment area, that little fragment parcel is actually this little green area here. You can see the bus is coming in on the slip road and the road for First Street West. This is that gravel area. So this is actually still part of the road right of way here, looking from east looking west. And then this next photo is a little bit further down as you go south on that far east end of that lot. This is looking directly west. You can see the CP rail line there to the left part of your screen. And this is the actual parcel. It extends out there directly west, looking west. So as part of the subdivision application, the town administration had worked with the applicant in terms of supplying some supporting information for the subdivision itself. And this related to access to the parcel as indicated in the site photo and the previous aerials. There's a large portion of undeveloped road between the actual subject parcel and First Street West. So there was some access information that was needed and some supporting documents. We're also working with the applicant about the developability of the site. That included eventual adherence to the land use bylaw standards and regulations. Also looking at the grade of the site, needing some stormwater and drainage planning and information, and ultimately some utility servicing and getting the utility services to that site so that they are serviced in accordance with town standards. So the subdivision and development regulation, the provincial regulation actually states that the subdivision authority, which is the town, has 60 days to make a decision on a subdivision. If the subdivision authority fails to make a decision within that 60-day period, then the application is actually deemed refused. Now, the Act, just like a development permit, very similar, does allow for this 60-day limit to be extended, and that is through an agreement that is struck between the town as the subdivision authority and the applicant. So a number of time extensions from the date of application after the original 60 days had expired, the applicant and the town had entered into a number of different time extension agreements, and that was over the course of the next year throughout 2018 and into 2019. However, the town and the applicant were not able to work through those issues, and in February 2019, the applicant did not renew the time extension agreement, and therefore the time did run out, and therefore the application was deemed refused as a result. And as a result of the deemed refusal, that did open up the ability for an appeal. The applicant does have the ability to appeal a decision and the deemed refusal. In normal circumstances, this appeal would be heard by the Town Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. However, in this case, because of its proximity to the Highway 1A and the fact that Alberta Transportation did not provide a waiver, what I mean by that is Alberta Transportation, the municipal government says that if the subdivision authority is not able to make a decision or approve a subdivision without the approval of Alberta Transportation, they sometimes waive this condition as part of the subdivision and development appeal regs. However, Alberta Transportation in this instance did not provide the waiver. Therefore, it fell under provincial jurisdiction, and the appeal was actually under provincial jurisdiction, and specifically that body that deals with appeals, which is called the Municipal Government Board. And that's why the appeal was heard by the Municipal Government Board and not our local Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. The hearing was held in April 17th, 2019, excuse me, and the Municipal Government Board decision was rendered on June 21st, 2019. And that was through the Municipal Government Order 018-2019. And the Municipal Government Board approved the subdivision subject to conditions, and those conditions were included in your agenda package. I'm just going to go through what those conditions are very briefly. The conditions included supplying the town with a plan of survey, needing to supply the town with an endorsement package, including all applicable fees. The property taxes needed to be paid and up to date. The applicant needed to provide information for appropriate access to the site, and that can be done through a mutual access agreement through their own property, but ultimately needing to get from the physical road on First Street West to the subject property. The Municipal Government Board, normally the town requires an urban standard, which is a hard surfacing standard or asphalt standard, but in this case, the Municipal Government Board had indicated that the applicant could develop that road to a gravel standard, but it was the applicant's responsibility to meet that requirement and provide the information on how they would meet that requirement. Applicable to this is the transportation impact assessment, and this was to assess the appropriate access that was presented by the applicant in terms of assessing it against its appropriateness and our current road network. Entering into a subdivision servicing agreement as well, and this is to cover off all of the required utilities that would service the site. That includes drainage, wastewater, and water. Also utility right-of-ways, ensuring that they are supplied in accordance with the approval as well, and that is easements and any other agreements, and that is both for the town and for any utility companies that are operating within the town. And also, lastly, the cost recovery for utility extensions that may be applicable for this site. So the road closure, the town of Cochrane got notification about a month ago, maybe a little over a month ago, that Alberta Transportation was proceeding with the closure of a portion of a road between this parcel and the slip road and the highway, and that's highlighted in blue here. So they are currently in that process of closing this road. If the road is closed, that would become a title that would belong to the town of Cochrane. You'll notice here that the portion of the road closure stops short east of this parcel here, and that is meant to leave a portion of that undeveloped road allowance open to provide access to this parcel. So the recommendation tonight is option 1, that council does not grant the extension of the MGB subdivision approval under MGB Order 18/2019. And the reason for that is that administration has, over the past year, there has been no substantial progress that has been made in terms of satisfying the conditions for this application. To satisfy the conditions of the approval, and therefore administration's not in a position to recommend that an extension be granted at this time. That does conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. I do understand that Mr. Kendall is here as well, and I believe he has the opportunity to speak to you here, but I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, Council, before we get to, we're just getting a bunch of feedback there, but questions, is there any, or sorry, a motion, is there any questions for administration? And maybe we'll provide Mr. Kendall an opportunity to speak. Don't see, oh, Councillor Reid, sorry, go ahead. I had the wrong screen up here.
Sorry. Just wondering what is the ability to, like, is this a final appeal? Will the applicant have an opportunity to appeal this decision? Or is this it?
Mr. Weldon?
yeah, to Councillor Reid through Mayor Janung, no, there is no opportunity to appeal this decision. Council has the authority to either extend it or not to extend it. If the extension is not granted, then it will ultimately mean, if the conditions aren't satisfied, it would ultimately mean that the subdivision decision by the MGB will become void.
Okay, I'll hold my other question then until later.
Okay, Councillor Flowers, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Weldon. Now that the road has become an issue, if it's denied, then can it be reapplied for? Or is it going to be a whole different scenario with the road being involved?
Through Mayor Janung to Councillor Flowers, just to clarify, is when you mean the road, is that the road closure that you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, so if the road is in fact closed, then there's a process that needs to be followed. If the road is closed, then that portion of that road would essentially become a parcel. So it would be a titled land, and it would no longer be a road. The eastern portion is still open, however, to provide the ability for access to this parcel. So ultimately, the parcel would still have the ability to be developed and have that access provided through that portion of the undeveloped road allowance. What it would mean, though, is that the subdivision on the west side, which is the subject of the appeal and the approval by the MGB, it would make that parcel to be a little bit more difficult to be subdivided. They would need to find an alternate access, and that would either have to be supplied through a mutual access agreement through the parcel itself or through this newly formed parcel that is being created. And that would be the only way that it could get access, because the only other possibility would be through the highway, and that would never happen. So it would be limiting, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I see Mr. Kendall's here, and it is part of his, as part of his request for the extension, he's asked for an opportunity to address council. So, Mr. Kendall, do you wish to turn your microphone on and provide us some background on why you're asking for an extension? Can't hear you yet.
Hello?
There
Can
you
you
are.
hear me? We're good?
Yep, go ahead.
So, there's a long history with this parcel, needless to say. We worked with the town for approximately a year trying to wait for Alberta Transportation to come up with a survey, which they had said to both of us would limit or establish the limit of the 1A expansion. It was only after this 12-month period had passed that we chose to seek a deemed refusal and a hearing at the Municipal Government Board. Previous to that, in 2013, Alberta Transportation had indicated to the town and to ourselves that if we could agree on the future alignment of the slip lane and access to our parcel, that they would support that. The town wrote a letter in 2013 to Alberta Transportation endorsing a plan that we had developed jointly together with the town of Cochrane. Subsequently to that, Alberta Transportation said, no, we decided we don't like it and we're not going to support that. So the town has been very good to deal with over the last 5-7 years on this, trying to get this to move forward. The fact that we haven't done anything is really not quite fair, because after we received the approval in late June of last year, we went out and the question kept coming back is, what is it going to look like long term? So I believe you have a copy in the package of a long-term development plan of what that road would look like in the access point. The access point to that road will never change. It is always going to be at the east end of the site where First Street West takes that jog. We supplied that in late October, early November, after several iterations trying to get it correct. And that forms part of your package. The other issue was stormwater management, and we submitted a report, again, not for specifically the subdivided piece, but that dealt with the entire parcel, both lots, and how they would be solved long-term. In terms of both those documents that we submitted that addressed the concerns, we have never had any formal requests from the town of Cochrane specifically asking for changes or clarifications. The Municipal Government Board established that we have to have access via a gravel road standard, the town's gravel road standard. Well, guess what? Town of Cochrane's a big city and it doesn't have a gravel road standard. It's got several gravel road standards. One's right across the street, and it's pretty much like this. And if you've been by the site lately, you'll see that whatever that standard is, it's supporting one heck of a lot of yellow iron and trucks, etc., as CP works on their extra spur line through Cochrane. An easy solution for this, and we've suggested it and haven't had a response. We haven't suggested it in writing, to be fair, but is a deferred servicing agreement. As we all know, we are not going to be allowed to develop a plan that I believe is also in part of your package that shows a series of buildings on that site, starting with a train station on the west end and ending with what could be a hotel or apartment block or offices, depending on where the market is on the east end. There will be a requirement of any development permit issue that services be extended to the town standards, that the road be built to the town standards, and that we meet any other requirements that the town may have. A deferred servicing agreement is not always used, but frequently is used, and the one that I saw most recently is for the old PNR site, where there's a deferred servicing agreement for upgrades, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, the roads are there, but there's a lot of other issues. So that's an easy solution. And that could be enacted right away and we go for registration. However, the plan that I did submit to you for long-term solution to that site does require some working through with the town of Cochrane on some of the outstanding issues as to how we will achieve that, and is somewhat complicated by the Alberta Transportation intent to close the road. We can't tell you when they're going to close it or if they're going to close it, because for 18 years I've heard a lot of stories from Alberta Transportation. Do they have to close it? No, they don't. I think they're just looking to shed the issue onto the town from themselves. If the town were to grant an extension, I would request that it be granted for a period of 12 months. It may never be registered, but it allows ourselves and the town of Cochrane to come to grips, hopefully once and for all, as to what that entry point into the town of Cochrane would look like. I believe that the drawings that we've submitted as part of this request tonight for an extension for the one lot go a long way to meeting the goals that I've heard espoused by the officials, both elected and administrative, as to what they would like as you enter the town from the west. What would grab the public's attention? I had a meeting today and party interested in locating on that site, and they absolutely love the idea of a train station on the west end. The reason we chose to do the train station there, I think, is fairly obvious. It captures the eye. It's a great entrance feature to the town of Cochrane, followed by a street full of heritage buildings. By having two separate titles, it allows us to build the train station and to finance the improvements required for the balance of the site, not encumbering them. This is too large an undertaking to finance in one tranche. It needs to be split into a couple of phases. The train station allows that because it would produce enough value such that we could finance the capital improvements required by the town of Cochrane in terms of streets, deep services, any other utilities, gas, electrical, etc. Without it, it means that we likely would be forced in starting on the east end of the site. And if we start on the east end of the site, it makes the west end much more complicated to develop. If, in fact, Alberta Transportation closed the site, then, or the road in front of the site, then we only have the one access point legally at the end of the site, which essentially amounts to a laneway to a driveway into a parking lot on the east end of the site, and that's it. We have no legal means of access to any parts to the west, which essentially means that development opportunities to the west of the end of the site are severely limited. If the town of Cochrane would see fit to grant an extension for 12 months, it doesn't mean that it will be registered, but it does mean that the three parties need to come together and agree as to what the long-term future of this site is. If that happens and Alberta Transportation still decides to close the road, then they have an obligation to purchase the site because they would take away access to the western lot by virtue of their closure. And that in turn could be very good for the town of Cochrane, because if they closed the road and had to purchase our land, then you would get the entire site for $0. So I would ask that you consider favorably our request. We have worked on this as best we can. We've had some personal health issues that have kicked me out for 6 months, more or less. We've had COVID issues, and staff have been very good in terms of being able to contact, etc. But we still haven't got hard answers as to deferred services agreement, transportation data that they would like, improvements or changes that they would like to the stormwater management plan that's been submitted, or to the road plan that was submitted as long-term solutions. And hopefully not confusing this site is not serviced with stormwater. It is similar to the totem building across the street and will require a dry well or several dry wells to handle stormwater management, which is in the report, which I believe I sent to you as well. You may have noticed that there's a pile of gravel growing on that site with all this rain. I don't know, it just seems to bubble up from the ground or somewhere, I'm not sure. But we granted access to the rail line to CP Rail. One of the conditions of that access is that they clean up the stormwater ditch that the town has currently on CP property, and it does venture into our property in a couple of locations. They've agreed to clean that up and realign it the way it was originally intended, and to bypass our property as part of that agreement. So that's what's going on there right now. There are potentially some other issues that could be addressed to the town's benefit there, which I'll talk to administration about, that came out of a conversation with them today. The intent was not to have the gravel there. The intent was to take it directly to the new rail bed beside the existing tracks, but they've been hampered by wet conditions and can't get their trucks down there. So I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you might have. We have worked on this And we've worked very hard at trying to come up with a long-term solution to this, which would negate the need for the subdivision in the long term, but would request that you do give us an extension such that we may continue to go down the route that we've established with this long-term development, and see if we can't resolve all of those issues.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kendall. If you would just hang on with us here while we see, we have some questions for administration now out of your report to us. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Weldon, Councillor Reid.
Trying to get off of mute.
There you go. Oh, you're muted again.
Just wondered, Mr. Weldon, what is the risk, or what are the implications, the negative implications of allowing a 12-month extension?
Here, I'll unmute my mic as well. Thank you. It's the timing and the uncertainty to get to the actual registration of these of the subdivision after 12 months. So if you use this as an indication, the last 12 months and even before that, over the year previous, and the information that was needed to advance the subdivision application through the town's process, and then again through once they were given approval through the MGB, and advancing the satisfaction of the conditions, there was a lot of work that was required to meet those conditions, and there's really no evidence that would continue into the next year. So in terms of risk to the town, there's really not much risk other than for that road closure. So Alberta Transportation is advancing that road closure, and that ultimately would become a titled parcel to the town. By extending this, that it would come into play in terms of providing access to that parcel, and perhaps even delaying the registration of that road closure with Alberta Transportation.
So if I understand that correctly, just in a quick few-word summary, is that the risk would be that it would hamper Alberta Transportation's request to be able to get access to that parcel of land, not this parcel, but that parcel of land, right? Our parcel of land.
It wouldn't get access, it wouldn't hamper Alberta Transportation's access. So ultimately, the parcel that would be created would become like an actual parcel title of land. It is no longer a road right-of-way, and that would become the town's property. However, given the location of where that second lot is, that is subject to this application or to this approval, that lot 2 on the west side of the parent parcel, it would essentially block the access to that second parcel. And so therefore, the opportunity to provide physical access would no longer be there, but you would have to entertain legal access through means of a mutual access agreement through either that parcel or the actual subject parcel itself, or the parent parcel itself.
So just to be clear, that's not a risk to the town, but a risk to the applicant.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Flowers, you had a question?
A couple questions, Mr. Weldon. Did you mention anything about this deferral of servicing agreement, or do you have an opinion on that one?
The town, with the deferral of servicing agreement, it's really not the case in this instance. We would want to see how the site is serviced, and so we wouldn't defer this the servicing agreement at this point. We would want to see the information through the engineering drawings that are required as part of our process to show how this site would be in fact serviced in accordance with town standards. So yeah, that wouldn't come into play here. We would want to see those. That's in line with the actual subdivision approval. It is a condition of that approval through the MGB, and it is our normal practice here at the town.
Okay, thank you. And also, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of risks with the extension, but is there expenses that go along with it on our side?
Well, the expenses is town time. We've been involved with this application, as Mr. Kendall has said, for a very, very, very long time, and it hasn't advanced. We have had a lot of interaction, but we haven't received the information that is required through our process in order for us to get to a decision for one, and that is the original application, and now for the entire year. So yeah, it's absolutely administration time that is at stake here as well.
Thank you. And for Mr. Kendall, thank you for your information that you shared with us. Just wondering if you could give a quick overview of your vision of this train station that you're speaking about.
The proposed building is a reproduction of a Station 10 from the CPR plan book. This one has been lengthened to a length of 100 feet and widened out to 26 feet to increase the usable square footage, meeting the land use bylaw in terms of setbacks all the way around. We believe that it's an iconic Western Canadian style building, and trains, for whatever reason, seem to attract a lot of followers, and a building such as this, anchored on the west end of town, followed by 5 other buildings that are all heritage design, that early 20th century, late 19th century style, we believe provides a tremendous anchor for the old town in particular, because I think the old town has been greatly hurt with all of the development on the south side of the tracks. The train station, frankly, is likely the easiest building to lease. We've had inquiries from restaurants to other retail type businesses for that building. They love the ability to have a patio, a wooden boardwalk around it, etc., and have that old time feel. And we'd like to try and get to a development such as the one that we put forward to you as part of the package. We do need a couple things there, and the problem I have, frankly, is Alberta Transportation have told us a lot of things. When we first acquired the site in 2002, they told us the access should be exactly where it is on that drawing that we prepared and submitted at the end of October, early November, of that street design. That's what they'd asked for then. They've basically played us around. The train station on the west end allows us to borrow enough capital to do all of the street improvements, all of the service extensions. The extensions are there right now opposite our site, connecting to the Totem building. I mean, it's all we're looking for is sewer and water and natural gas. There is no storm water in that end of town. The stormwater is on CPR property. And when we built the IGA, we actually put in 300 feet of pipe there to extend the western end of downtown's stormwater capacities to the edge of the old IGA site. And CPR, based on our meeting of Tuesday of this past week, their engineer drawings show that they will continue that drainage course to the west of their property. No questions asked. They're going to clean it up. So there's very little risk to the town of giving us the, if any, the train station there. The risk is to Alberta Transportation dealing with us fairly. And I think if Alberta Transportation does not deal with us fairly, the town will likely end up with the entire site as their own as a gift from Alberta Transportation, because we believe that they have to compensate us if they close that road.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kendall.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden, and let's keep our questions to the extension if we can, as much as the vision on the property is, it's a good one. Well, from my perspective, I guess, let's keep it to the extension. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, thank you. So Bruce, if you were to get an extension of a year or even 6 months, would you be able to start construction this year? Would that be looking something you'd be able to advance in the current economic climate?
I would love to be able to start construction on that site before frost flies, if we were able to get an extension. We actually currently do have a development permit application in. We shouldn't cloud this issue with that issue, but we don't know which way council is going to go, and I guess ultimately our vision is what we'd like to see happen. That's our preference. However, if it's not to be, it's not to be. I don't fault the town on any of this. Basically, we've been played by Alberta Transportation since the early 2000s on what they would like to see here. And in fact, at the Municipal Government Board hearing, they made two contradicting statements. One was that they had modeled the site for up to 500 vehicle trips a day, and they had no problems with what design we had put forward, which is basically the one that they gave me in 2003. But they were opposed to it because they didn't know what their road would look like, and they've been telling us and the town for many, many years that they're just going to do this survey and they'll tell us if they need any of that road right away or not. So what they're doing by virtue of this is dumping the problem in your lap, and if the subdivision is extended for a period of, I prefer 12 months, it means that they actually have to deal with the issue instead of dumping it in your lap.
Okay. Can I ask a question to Mr. Weldon? It can help me out with the processes here. So I know you went over this, but if there's no subdivision, if this... Am I back on?
Yep, there you are.
Because what I said was brilliant, never to be repeated. But, sorry, help me out here. It's with the process. So if the extension is denied, then Mr. Kendall can reapply for a subdivision and follow and just replicate the process that we always have?
Through the mayor to Councillor McFadden, yes, that is correct. The application it would need to be reapplied, or Mr. Kendall would be required to reapply to the town for the same subdivision and go through the process again. That is correct if this extension is not extended by council.
Okay. So then you would have staff time again, but there's a new fee at that point.
That is correct. You would have to, and all the same submission requirements would be required at that time as well. It would be the same process for the circulation. It would be the same process in terms of the studies and plans that would be required to be submitted for us to make a decision. Again, the same legislation would apply, and yeah, the process would have to unfold exactly the way that it had prior.
Right, so just to honor the process and not make an exception, it would essentially just put us back to go. Okay, now can you do an extension for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? Is that at council's discretion, or what does that look like?
Yes, the time frame for the extension is at council's discretion. That is correct.
Yeah, that's part of the options.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, option 1 was the recommended action. Option 2 is defined it here. Grant an extension for 3 months, and option 3 is pick a period that council wants to extend. Councillor McFadden, you're good with your questions? Okay, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Two quick questions, one to administration, and this, I'm having trouble pulling up this one piece of the agenda right now, so I didn't see the options on there, but to administration, is this merely a policy recommendation, or is this also an administrative opinion that we deny the appeal? I didn't quite get that. Are we just following policy, or is this also an opinion?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, it is a recommendation from administration. It is not following any particular policy. This is a recommendation, correct?
Are you able to comment on Mr. Kendall's points about Alberta transportation frustrations, being able to move the process forward? Or have we already went all weekend on that subject?
Well, I think what's important to keep in mind is that there was an approval. So the approval was given by the Municipal Government Board. And the approval, and it was subject to conditions. And I'd like to just point those conditions out in your agenda package as well. There was a number of conditions that were needed to be satisfied before the parcel could be registered with land titles. So I think well, what's important here right now is that a decision has been made. 12 months has passed, which is the legislation that's in place for the satisfaction of those conditions. Those conditions have not been satisfied, and therefore an extension is now required. So yeah, I can't comment specifically on the frustrations with Alberta Transportation. There was access issues throughout the subdivision application itself, and that was facilitated between the town and Alberta Transportation and the applicant as well. And that had to do with access to this site.
Final question, and it might be on the agenda again. I'm sorry, this is the only thing I can't seem to pull up here. What is there a recommendation on if we do give an extension, a recommendation on the amount of time from administration? Did I hear 3 months?
Our recommended action is that it does not get extended.
Right.
There are options. I would have to defer to council for the recommended time frame. We did put option 2 to council for 3 months as the ability to further those plans and those requirements to satisfy the conditions of the application. But option 3 is at the discretion of council. So administration is sticking with option 1.
Thank you. Okay. I'm having trouble pulling it up, so I'm not going to put a motion out there. I'll save it for the next, for Councillor Nagel perhaps. But my feeling is I do have sympathies with some of the Alberta transportation things we've heard, and also the COVID problems that we've just went through are very hard to account for, and I have sympathy for that time delay. So I would be sympathetic to option B as it sounds for at least a minimum extension. And I'll defer to the next councillor. I believe it's Mr. Nagel.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Nagel?
Yeah, sorry, I'm off my webcam again. I'm having some technical problems over here. I keep on losing internet connection. Anyways, I would like to move option 3 to give Mr. Kendall his actual request. And obviously looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say about this, but I'd like to move the council grants an extension of the Municipal Government Board subdivision approval under MGB Order 018/19 for 12 months. And my thinking is just that I'd like to see that corner turn into something nice. Other than a gravel pad, it sounds like Mr. Kendall has a vision for it. And while, there's lots of chatter about whether or not we need more residential development, et cetera, this to me is really more of like our downtown core. And if we could get something nice in that entry to our downtown core, I think that would just be nothing but good. So I'd like to support that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for a 12-month extension. Thank you, Councillor Nagel. Councillor Federico?
I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of option 3, but I would be in favor of option 2. I do realize that there are challenges that Mr. Kendall has had to face due to COVID, but I don't believe that COVID obviously has carried a 9-month or a 12-month, period of time where he's had difficulties getting things done. So I do realize that 3 months, to me, is fair. That's about the longest distance that COVID has been in play. So I would be in favor of bringing option 2 forward and granting him an extension at this time for the 3-month period.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flowers, you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say I agree with Councillor Nagel's comments. If we're going to do it, we might as well do it for a year, because 3 months goes very quickly, and this COVID is still here, and who knows what's going to happen. So I'm in favor of doing a year.
Okay. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, in the balance of respecting our staff processes and time and making sure we do have the commitment to actually getting it to move ahead, I much prefer kind of the balance of the 3 months. That way we know that, if the subdivision and everything's met in that 3-month period, we do have a strong commitment from the applicant that this is going to move ahead. And I mean, it's a great vision to have an anchor at that end, but I do want to make sure that that we're giving an exception that's actually going to deliver. So I would prefer the 3-month extension.
Okay, any other comments at this time? We've got a motion for 12. We've got a couple comments pushing for 3. I have not weighed in yet. I too would like to grant an extension. In my notes, actually, I was in the middle of where both 12-month extension and the 3 months, where I was going to maybe the end of 2020. We did hear Mr. Kendall in his presentation tonight say that his intention was to get something going before the frost is in the ground, which would be winter, I'm assuming. Maybe it's looking up pretty gray outside. Maybe it's this afternoon still. But yeah. So I would be, much for the same comments as Councillor McFadden, that, respecting town time, but also I think it's kind of redundant to ask an applicant to go through the entire process again to try and get back to today when we could just grant an extension. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'd like to go to the end of the year, but I'd wait to hear from my other colleagues what people are thinking. Sounds like we're all in favor of an extension. We're just circling around the amount of time. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I would support Morgan's motion. I think 12 months is more than fair, given what I've heard of this story in the past, and just recognizing some of the challenges that exist. And I think the potential opportunity is phenomenal. Could be phenomenal for the town. So I would support the 12-month.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Just to weigh in, I was I was right with the mayor on the end of 2020. That's what I have written in front of me. So I support that, but I think we're coming close to a decision. So
Yeah.
So I can move to the end of the year as well. Happy medium.
Me too.
Okay, now we've, that just made it muddy. So now we're, well, no one's really made an amendment, so we do have a motion on the floor. Unless I'm hearing an amendment from somebody, which I'm not.
I'll call the question.
Okay, so we will call the question on the, oh, Councillor McFadden, you've got, I see your text, your motion there, or your, sorry, comment?
Yeah, it's hard to catch all this stuff on the fly. Yeah, I would like to propose an amendment to Councillor Nega's motion that the extension be granted to the end of this year as opposed to the full year.
So that is June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 7 months. So we're kind of in the middle. I've given my 2 cents on this. Councillor Wilson has. Anyone else on the amendment? I would maybe just check in with our tower here to make sure we're procedurally in line. Ms. Lowe, could you provide some guidance to me before I go off the rails here, right at the train station?
Yeah, sure, if I could help, Mayor. In this instance, that actually wouldn't necessarily be an amendment to the motion, because what you'd be doing is you'd be passing a motion. Should the motion put forward by Councillor McFadden pass, there would be no reversion back to the original motion, which you would normally go back to and then vote on, which would be in contradiction with the amendment that you had just passed. So it would be my suggestion that you call the vote on the motion on the floor. If that motion fails, then Councillor McFadden can put her motion forward.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
And here I was just trying to be friendly.
We were trying to get there, and Councillor Reid was trying to get us to the end zone here. So call the question on the motion on the floor, which is an extension for 12 months. All those in favor of a 12-month extension? There's 3 opposed. Opposed? So I saw 3-3. Who are we missing?
No, it's 3-4.
3-4. Okay, so that is defeated. Councillor McFadden, do you want to put your motion on the floor for a extension to the end of the year?
Yeah, I move that the subdivision be extended through to the end of the year. Sorry, I don't have
December 31st, 2020.
till December 31st, 2020.
Any discussion? We've discussed it, okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor, extension to the end of 2020? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Weldon. Thank you, Mr. Kendall, for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to council strategic priorities. Agenda item 6C. I believe we're waiting for Mr. Heineman to take the podium. We can't hear anything if you're talking, Mr. Hyman, or if we're just waiting for screen to come up.
I was just getting everything organized, so hopefully you can hear me now. And,
Yes.
You
I
can see
wasn't
this.
trying to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. Hopefully you can hear me, can see me, and see the presentation. So appreciate the opportunity to present council priorities 2020 to 2021. As council may recall, we did have a discussion on these in a strategic session on Thursday, May 14th, as well as Tuesday, May 19th. However, this is an opportunity to do this in a public setting and certainly proceed from there. So, the agenda for tonight, council strategic priorities. We want to review what was completed in 2019, what's been completed to date in 2020, and what's anticipated to be completed by the end of 2020. We also want to outline what's remaining in terms of those priorities and additional priorities for your consideration as well. We'll give you administration's recommendations, and then there'll be an opportunity for some council discussion. So why are council strategic priorities so important? Because it sets the course for where the organization's efforts will be directed. It's going to guide our organization in the programs and services we deliver to the community. And probably one of the most important things is it guides our budget process. So those are three critical things to consider. As you may recall, council has 4 strategic priorities, that being community connectivity, so focusing on multimodal transportation solutions that achieve positive traffic and pedestrian flows throughout the community. Community development and planning, so focused on improved development and land use plans that align with the social policy framework and the growth management strategy to promote a complete community while preserving Cochrane's unique identity. Community engagement was a key item when this council came in, and we really want to focus on improved community engagement opportunities. And then the last item is community facilities and services. Focus on services and spaces that achieve a safe and improved sense of community. So those are council's strategic priorities. And now what I want to touch on is what was completed in 2019. Under community connectivity, we've finalized the agreements for the ultimate access to Sunset Ridge, implemented on our local on-demand transit, which included finalizing a contract with Southland, tested the on-demand systems for the fall implementation. We completed the design and construction of the Sunset Ridge pathway connection. We completed the Spray Lakes to Jim Uffelman Memorial Park pathway connection and improved pathway connectivity along George Fox Trail. So those are all complete. In terms of development and planning, we completed a long-term community visioning plan, which obviously council had a big hand in helping us complete, and we're very excited about its future and how it will guide us moving forward. But we also completed the annexation of the Heritage Hills quarter section, as well as a master plan, which received approval from Rocky View Schools, and also we completed the annexation of the 40-acre site north of Sunset Ridge. In terms of engagement, completed a customer satisfaction survey. Facilities and services, we focused on achieving organizational efficiencies, and I think Justin or Mr. Perrin's presentation this evening is just one department that certainly has achieved that. And what's to be completed in 2020? So connectivity, acquire a bus fleet, install our transit stops, complete construction of the asphalt pathways surrounding the east side of Jumping Pound Ridge. So those are some projects that are underway. Development and planning, development of the 10-year economic development strategy. So that came before you in February and was improved. Of course, engagement, a little bit challenging under the current circumstances to do a lot of engagement, but we are looking for new and innovative ways to do this during COVID, and certainly adapting to the circumstances, and think that we still want to emphasize the importance of engagement where we can. Facilities and services, again, we're continually focusing on achieving organizational efficiencies. Throughout the COVID period, we've reached into our organization and requested that our managers find efficiencies in their operational budgets, and also looked at our capital projects, which we have reviewed with you, and made strategic recommendations moving forward. So, anticipated to be completed in 2020 in terms of connectivity, complete the Jack Tennant Memorial Bridge and connecting road network. Obviously, that's one of the most important projects for our community, and we're very excited about that. It is on budget and on time, so we're looking for a fall 2020 opening for that project. Complete the design and construction of the Horse Creek pedestrian crossing. This one is virtually right there. We are just waiting for CP to complete the installation of the or activate the signals. So we're hoping to have a grand opening here shortly. We realize that a number of people are using that right now, but we would like to have an official unveiling of that important infrastructure that is connecting our communities. The upgrade of the asphalt pathway in Crawford Ranch is something else in 2020, as well as the asphalt pathway between River Avenue and the regional pathway near the Bow River. We are going to continue doing engagement. One of the big things that we are thinking about for engagement opportunities would be our land use bylaw, but also the Center Avenue upgrades. Development and planning. The annexation is complete, but we have to formally acquire the 130-acre parcel from Rocky View Schools. Complete the land use bylaw review and update, implementing an annual review to be an update every 5 years. So our land use bylaw team is working on that, and we're excited to bring that to you in the fall. Design a new integrated RCMP and municipal enforcement detachment. Ms. Lowe and her team with Mr. Barcy, they're working on that, and that is making good progress as well. And then, of course, we will continue to focus on achieving organizational efficiencies. Additional priorities for your consideration. Connectivity, the Riverfront Bridge or Riverfront Park Bridge replacement in 2020. Smart traffic management technology would be moved to 2021. Development and planning, we have recommended that the Railway Street West infrastructure upgrades occur in 2020. That project has already been tendered, and I believe the team is looking through those tenders right now. The utility relocation for Highway 1A 22 interchange, that has been moved into 2020 from 2021. That will allow us to get these utilities that service Sunset Ridge out of the way of the future construction of that important interchange to our community. The implementation of the 10-year business development strategy, Mr. Corman did bring that to you in February and is working through that. Again, he is working with the Economic Recovery Task Force at this point, but he is referencing that document as well. The River Heights Reservoir. So you may recall that we wish to have the design of that reservoir expansion in 2020. So we are going to move forward with that, and then to proceed with our stormwater master plan in 2020 as well. And then really, Council, as I mentioned before, emphasized the importance of engagement, certainly through this COVID period. It is very important for us to get these important task force moving forward, that being the Social Recovery Task Force as well as the Economic Recovery Task Force. And then certainly one of the things we want to emphasize is the importance of federal and provincial advocacy, which is ongoing. So we know there is a number of stimulus projects and proposals out there, and we want to take advantage of them and ensure that the Cochrane projects are at the forefront. Now when we talk about community connectivity, these are, there are only some minor changes. You may recall this from the strategic sessions. The items in gold are the additions from what was previously there. So I won't go through reading the entire slide, just the items that we would recommend adding. And that would be, the first one would be in community connectivity would be relocate the municipal utility infrastructure as required by the province to facilitate the first phase of the interchange completion. So that would be a 2020 project. Further down, we would recommend design and construct improvements to Center Avenue between 2020 and 2022. Implement smart traffic technology or smart traffic management technology to assist with improving local traffic flow. That is in the 2021 year. So if you recall, during our strategic sessions, there was some desire to have a time frame added to these. So we have done that to reflect the conversation. And certainly the last item is complete the Riverfront Park Bridge replacement in 2020. In terms of community development and planning, again, going to the gold items on the page, complete the Stormwater Master Plan that I previously referenced, so that's a 2020 to 2021 project. And then if we move down further, initiate work to update the Cochrane Sustainability Plan, very important document to our community. And but we wanted to clarify that this is following the adoption of the Municipal Development Plan, which is anticipated to occur in 2022. And again, just to clarify for council and anybody watching why it's in 2022 is related to the CMRB work. So the regional plan is coming forward. That's anticipated to be done in 2021. So we did not want to get ahead and do our municipal development plan prior to that regional work being complete. I've also mentioned earlier in the presentation the upgrade of the Railway Street West infrastructure to ensure future service capacity for this important service corridor. So that's happening in 2020. Relocate the required utilities as required for the Highway 1A 22 interchange upgrades. The 10-year business development strategy, which I've already referenced, as well as the River Heights Reservoir. So that is really to actually proceed in 2023, but we want to get the design done this year. In terms of community engagement, much of it is the same, but we wanted to add some key items. The Municipal Development Plan 2021, so we'd be starting that engagement process in 2021 following the CMRB process. CMRB growth and servicing plans are going to be taking place over 2020 to 2022. And then if we go further down on the list, okay, one of the important things is to implement the recommendations of the Social Recovery Task Force, as well as the recommendations of the Economic Recovery Task Force. And we also want to create and implement a provincial and federal advocacy strategy. This is such important work for us as we move forward, as all the municipalities in Alberta are going to be competing for limited dollars. And really some of the important projects that we'd be looking at are Center Avenue, Highway 1A interchange, and advocate for regional mass transit. So a number of exciting projects for our community. The community and facilities and services remains essentially the same. If you recall, we had struck one item from that list previously. So that does conclude my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Federico, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you for the information, Mr. Hyman. I just wanted to make sure that the public is aware that when it comes to things like the Sunset Ridge access point, that obviously that although we've done a lot of work on our end, there are a lot of factors that will still influence that secondary entrance coming out of Sunset Ridge. I mean, because also it sounds like it's kind of been completed, which, I mean, obviously we know that it's dependent on build out of Sunset Ridge and along with Melcor's cooperation, as well as when it comes to Horse Creek Park and the recreation part. And I thought Councillor McFadden maybe could speak to that a little bit about what that plan looks like, because again, it's one of those things that it sounds like we're moving forward on projects. I just don't want to misconstrue that to the public, that these projects are not necessarily, people aren't going to expect them next year, that they're going to be opened up and we're going to be moving forward. A lot of these have a lot of extra steps and a lot of extra contingencies behind them.
Yeah, Marty, I can, anyhow, thanks for the segue, I guess. and I think it's a really fair point that while we are, successes are being made in these directions and good steps towards sunset and that second access, and the big point that does require build out and therefore, focused development in that community to make that happen. And then, for the rec center or at Horse Creek Road, they're certainly through the engagement sessions that the committee did, a lot of interest and a lot of support for seeing the Horse Creek Destination Sports Park become a reality. But, that's not an imminent thing. We've taken some good steps, but in our engagement communications, we need to realize that, some preliminary studies are being done, but some of that's been pushed into next year's work. And none of the funding for that is even on our 10-year capital plan. So a heads up for this council that if recreation is important in the outdoor sports park context, we're going to have a serious look at how we adjust the 10-year capital plan to reflect those priorities, because right now it can get designed, but there's nothing in the 10-year future that says anything's going to happen there. So anyhow, thanks for the flag. I think it's certainly something we can address, but it's just putting it in context that it's not a go-ahead.
Okay, let's get back to the queue here. Councillor Flowers, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the information and for putting the timelines on all of these. It helps me in my brain getting an order of what's happening. So it made more sense to me before to have the Cochrane Sustainability Plan done before the land use bylaw. But then when it comes into play with the regional plan, it makes sense to do it afterwards. So it starts to come together. The one question I did have was about engagement with our First Nations neighbors. It's an ongoing work that we have in progress, but is there somebody leading that up now, or is there something we could do to expand that work?
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. It is very important for us and to our organization. Again, as Council may recall, we had quite a bit of engagement with our neighbors and a great number of learnings. So we want to build on that. Mr. Weldon, myself and Melissa have had some conversations on this recently, and we'll certainly look for other opportunities to continue that engagement as we move forward.
Great, thank you.
I continue to work with the First Nations when we can too. I got a request this week about a part of the McDougall Church rebuild. So there's Rebecca from our office continues to keep in touch with Stoney Dakota. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I continue to be really excited about our council priorities that we're talking about. Thanks for the presentation, Drew. The road network, improving our local infrastructure, getting rail crossings and bridges and road widenings going are all things that we're all very excited about. The organizational efficiencies and improvements we're finding constantly inspire me. I'm very happy about that. I just have one nitpicky thing as I look through this. Sure. And that's that I brought it up earlier as well when we were talking about the allocation of our CRL levy funds, the 13 million earlier in the presentation. I'm a bit concerned that there's an arts center placeholder in there for $3 million right now. And the only reason that concerns me is I don't think we've had an opportunity to actually talk about this, have any public debate about an arts center going forward. And so I'm just, that did concern me, and I was hoping we could just talk about our CRL current our allocation for those funds and how we're moving forward. And why it's concerning me is we're going to hand this baton off to a future council, and it worries me when we have funding already allocated that there's an expectation, just as Councillor Fedeko already said, and that was a very wise comment. Councillor McFadden made an excellent one too, that we have many things that are unfunded, and allocating money ahead of time concerns me. So I was hoping we could talk about that if it's an appropriate time.
Certainly, would you like to talk about this now, or would you like at a future strat session?
So, well, no, just Councillor Wilson, you raise a good point, and I don't want it to go unanswered. We can highlight it and bring it back as a complete package, comprehensive package of how the CRL works, where the designations go, and then how the funds are allocated in future budgets. Would that satisfy that with you, or do you want to have a high-level answer tonight, maybe, if Mr. Hyman is there?
No, I realize I kind of threw that at administration without no, I wasn't looking for anything specific. It was more of exactly what you just said, Mr. Mayor, to come back with a little bit more of a detailed plan with CRL funds at a future meeting to come. I just wanted to bring it up as we're talking about our strategic priorities right now.
No, it's a good point. We can highlight that, business arising from council priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd be happy to bring that forward and have an opportunity to prepare and certainly share all the information, and then certainly come back to a public forum so the information could be shared, and look at engagement opportunities as well, so we involve everyone.
Excellent.
Just, sorry, Councillor Wilson, but just for your, comfort, maybe the priorities will not be setting any direction. So there's no worry that if we pass the priorities tonight, that those funds are actually allocated there. We have a lot of opportunity in the future and future councils to change that.
I understand. Thank you. My comments were more to see if there was a discussion of anybody else that had the same concerns I did. I didn't mean to throw administration and our CAO in an awkward position. So thank you for the presentation. And I really endorse our strategic priorities. That's one thing that's concerning me. That's all.
Yeah, no, and it's all good, Councillor Wilson. We questions, they come up, and when they come up, you should ask them, and here we are. So we'll follow up with that and get some more clarity in the future.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Wilson's comments, I really appreciate the fact that he raised that question, and I'm very interested in hearing those answers. My comments were just to say that I'm, as a member of our council, really proud of where these strategic priorities are going, and in particular the community connectivity. You know, when you think about us focusing on the multimodal transportation solutions that we've talked about for so long, you know, and really just the positive pedestrian flow throughout a community. I mean, this is an incredible list. You know, I mean, think about the 1A 22. Yes, we all know about that one, but think about Center Street and Fifth Avenue. You know, the access that Marnie referred to in Sunset. You know, I mean, just the whole smart technology management. I mean, I'm really excited about where we're going with this, in addition to the fact that we are carrying on the tradition of the former councils in terms of the regional network networks. I think this is really great for our community. And, if anything comes out of this meeting tonight, from the media, I hope they pick up on the fact that this is really great. This is a great news story, right? And I think one that collectively we're really proud of. So those will be my comments, and thanks to the administrative team for pulling this together, and to my council members for their thoughtful consideration of where we need to be and where we need to take this community to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Federico?
Councillor Reid was right. I mean, we have done a lot of good things, so I don't want it to sound like we haven't. Going back on what Councillor Wilson kind of said about, having kind of money earmarked for an art center and things, I do have another concern that is not in our 10-year strat plan, and that comes down to a secondary fire hall. It's something that I've made aware for a long time. And while we do have property, I do realize, or land set aside in, Southbow Landing. I mean, right now, the whole COVID thing makes things very unpredictable. We don't know what kind of development is going to be going forward, what's not going to be going forward. I would hate for us to have funds earmarked towards something that is seen as not necessarily a necessity. I mean, I'm sure it's a necessity to some, but safety, I think, trumps all for our community. So I just want to make sure that we are being aware and looking at all the factors when it comes down to that 10-year plan. And maybe that's something that can be in discussion, obviously, when it comes down to Councillor Wilson's point of investigating maybe where some of those funds will go for the long range, because that's something that does concern me right now.
Okay, and just to be clear, we're not allocating any funds with our priorities, but I have heard you bring up the secondary fire hall quite a few times, Councillor Federico. Maybe that's something we could address at a future strategic session as well, and get a real in-depth report from administration on how they determine where those go, what the perceived need is and what the potential is in the future.
I would appreciate that, because I realize that it's not the build of a hall that's going to cost us the money. It's going to be the equipment and it's going to be the manpower. And I just want to make sure that we're long-range planning for that, because I don't want that to hit us all at once. It will kill the taxpayer. So we just want to make sure that we're planning wisely for that one.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Councillor McFadden, you've got another comment? Just need to unmute. There we
We're
go.
going to be glad when the COVID world has moved on. Yeah, so a couple of comments. It's always entertaining for me to be like the voice of history. So we, with the CRL context, I think that was the 07 to 10 council that did that. And it's just, you always do inherit decisions and guidance and priorities of previous councils. So it'll be good to get a CRL update so that everybody can understand how those projects are on that list and how that money could be and how it is restrained from moving around to other things. But I think it's also good, as a community, we've really moved into reviewing the 10-year plan I mean, that happens every year now, and we've grown into that process. But it is important to start looking ahead and start questioning some of those items on there as the world has changed. From the fire hall, to some of their most recently championed items. For me, of course, a priority is always recreation and connectivity. And so again, it was highlighted today, some of the real wins and what's going to happen this year is a lot of the transportation projects that are being advanced. And I'm happy to see those not only from like the connectivity point, but also because there's a lot of jobs that go with that work that's going to be done. And I'm really glad to see that we're able to invest in bringing jobs directly to our municipality in the time that we do need them to happen. So that was great news. And then, of course, I've been championing pathways and connections since a very long time ago. I think 07, that was on my campaign platform. So it's nice to see some of those done, and I'm looking forward to this summer to be able to go and hike all those and experience a lot of these completed projects. So overall, really good. And I'm really glad to see council starting to look ahead and question some of our assumptions. But I think we're in a good place, and our administration team is doing a lot to make sure we stay in a good place. So anyhow, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Just in terms of the preparation of these documents, in terms of strategic priorities, and while I appreciate Councillor Fideco's long-term vision of the fire hall, is it my understanding, Drew, that all of this was kind of run by our senior staff? So this would include the chief and his advice in terms of what was needed and when?
Yes, Councillor Reid, we've reviewed this and certainly we'd be happy to talk about the future fire hall. I know in working with the fire chief in 2015, myself, when we were doing South Bow Landing, we identified a future need, but at this point, I don't believe that that's a priority right now. So we've identified the priorities and that clear line of sight for us to establish budgets. But again, we can revisit that through a strat session and ensure that we get the latest information on our growth and have the fire chief's information for everyone to review.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, I don't want the public to think that the council and senior administration came up with this all on their own. I mean, essentially, this is a collaborative decision in relation to what we're hearing from our senior staff, including the fire chief, who during his presentation, I don't recall him saying a need in the 10-year plan for a fire hall, but I really appreciate the fact that we would look to circle back so that Councillor Fideco and others who are concerned about the safety get the answers they need in terms of being able to make an informed decision. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McFadden, you have another comment?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to offer some support to Councillor Fideco. I think it's great that she's highlighting the need for the fire services. Because like historically, buildings and decisions like that, they don't happen in a year or two. The RCMP has been on the list to get done for, I think, my entire term. So those big projects can take a long time to get advanced on there. And then, of course, as Marnie has said, we need to be planning ahead. It's not only the capital build out and the site selection, those type of things, but also making sure that we're budgeting and planning ahead for the extra crews that will be needed to manning. So I think it's a really forward-looking thought, and I think it's great that it's being highlighted because it hasn't hit the 10-year plan, and there's some other items there. So I'm glad we're questioning them. I just don't want them to be, dismissed because it's a vital part of our infrastructure that we need to provide as a community. So that was all I wanted to say on that, just to applaud Marnie for bringing that up.
Okay, and I don't think anybody's dismissing anything tonight. I think what we decided was to bring it back at a strategic session and get some more information. So, Councillor Padeco, I see you have a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McFadden, for that. I mean, the whole point of me bringing it up is not that I feel like we haven't done anything with it. My only question is that South Bow Landing might be delayed if it continues on at all. We don't know that right now. Obviously, COVID times are a different time. I just don't want to ignore the fact that that could be dropped. So it was not necessarily a fact that we have not done our due diligence as a community or ignoring anything. I think that was kind of an unfair comment, I will say. I want to do my best to make sure that safety is a priority, and that will always be my priority. So it wasn't that we're not doing our diligence. It's a fact that, you know what, if things have changed, then we need to be on top of it and making sure we're looking at all the factors and not pushing them aside. So thanks, Councillor Reid, for bringing that up.
Okay, back to the priorities. I haven't weighed in yet, and as everyone else has said, I'm really proud of this list. There's a lot on here. What I really liked that we did this year was a subtle change, but we brought more definition, more dates, as Councillor Flowers has pointed out. We have some real measurables that we can go to from year to year. This is a hearty list that shouldn't be overlooked by many, to just the amount of work that is involved in pulling all of these together and pulling them off is a feat in itself. So and I'm not going to go through everything again, but the thing that really stands out for me is under our community engagement, and it's something that I feel that has been missing for quite some time, and I think it's not that it's not been done, but I'm glad we've highlighted it here, and that is the create and implement a provincial and federal advocacy strategy. That in itself, I think the amount of work that we've done in the last year with the ministers and the province has really been paying dividends with our work on the water license, the work on the downtown pedestrian crossing, 1A and 22, the continued advocacy there, and the extension of 22 North to Sunset Boulevard are all things that come from working with the province closely. And I believe strongly that we need to do that and have more of a concerted effort in that. So I'm glad to see it on the list. But the Reader's Digest version from myself is, yes, I'm very happy and proud of all of the work that we have done as council, administration, as our entire team, that if we can continue to pull some of these things off in the next year, I think we have a lot to be proud of. So thank you, Mr. Hyndman, for presenting this tonight and all of the work that's gone into it from your team. Thank you. Has anyone officially put a motion on the floor? I can't remember, no. Does someone want to do that?
I'm happy to do it.
Councillor Reid, okay. Anyone have any other comments before I call the question? No? All those in favor of the council's strategic priorities 2020-2022? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have 2020 community grants. 6D. Scrolling down, we have Ms. Knight. There you are.
Here I am. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In your agenda package this evening is the community grants report and distribution summary for your consideration. The existing policy that governs the application and approval process for community grants is currently undergoing a revision, but as it has not been approved by council as of yet, the existing policy was used to review all applicants to determine contribution amounts and qualifications under this program. As part of the 2020 budget, Council approved a maximum $60,000 budget to fund the community grant program. The total requested amount from all of the groups was $58,150. Administration reviewed the applications against the current grant policy to determine the qualifying contributions. Under the current policy, that maximum amount is 50% of total cost to a maximum of $2,500, which brought the qualifying contributions amount listed in the table attached to your report to $54,116. Copies of all of the grant applications and a detailed summary was provided to Council for your review last week and provided to you separately under the FOIP Act. And a summary of Administration's recommendations were provided as part of your report tonight. Please note that Council does have the authority to waive any provisions of this policy at their discretion. The timelines for the projects in our community grants do sometimes spread into the next calendar year, so there are currently 6 groups that received funding as part of the 2019 community grant program that had to postpone their event or delay their purchase due to the impacts of COVID-19. Those postponements were approved by administration. We are working closely with those groups to ensure that the funding supplied is utilized as outlined in their original applications or ultimately returned to the town should their events be postponed indefinitely. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the report or the table attached to it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Knight. You answered both of my questions right at the end, so that was great. Thank you. Council, we need a motion. Just going back to recommended action is that Council reviews the submitted community grant application and decides by resolution distribution of grant funds to applicants. Councillor Flowers, you have a comment?
I'll move the recommended action that we follow that as outlined. I just wanted to comment that it's going to be a challenging year for all these groups to get this work done. So I'm glad that we're being as patient as we can possibly be. And it's also exciting to see the art gallery with their new programming in place getting started throughout the, all the bad stuff that's been happening. There's some light at the end of the rainbow. But thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councillor Flowers. That's what I was going to ask, was about the COVID-19 response, and Ms. Knight did mention that eloquently, I might add, that we will work with all of the groups. I was happy to hear that as well. Any other comments, questions about the community grants? I have got one, and it's just in regards, and I completely understand COVID-19 has thrown a wrench is just too small of a word to say, but a wrench into the system about the updating of this policy. You're working on it. The motion that Councillor Wilson had brought forward quite a few months ago, but you're working on quite a few iterations, and then that's changed again, and now can you just maybe speak to where you're at with that quickly?
We have been working on this policy for some time, and as you said, there's been a number of iterations of it. What we are working to do is pull the community grant piece into its own individual policy, and then the annual operating grant piece into a separate policy for Council's endorsement. And then in the existing policy is also the endowment fund. That is being pulled into a policy that Christy Bell's team is working on as part of the Ranch House and Rec and Culture, because that's what those funds are used for. So the current policy is a bit complicated, and so pulling it into something that's more updated, easier for the user groups as well, especially in regards to the annual operating grant piece, so that there's more clarity for Council, the people who are providing the grants to, and everyone involved administratively, to make that easier to put in place as well. So we're hoping to have that to Council in September for your final approval and consideration.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Just to speak to Mr. Mayor, you'd mentioned about a previous motion when we were trying to evaluate our community grants and how we do things in this process. My original intention there was, I'm happy to report as I look down this list, was some sort of a dollar matching or a way for us to contribute to things that are already contributing to our community without outright sponsoring them. And I'm proud to say that seems to be working quite well when you look down this list of people that are coming to us with money already fundraised and ready to go, and we're just topping it up to make it a great community event. So I'm pretty pleased with the way I see things going right now. This looks great to me. I just had one question to Mrs. Knight about our postponed, or not postponed, but at least greatly changed Canada Day activities. I don't see them on this list. I believe that's a separate, that's listed in a second area of our budget. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, that is actually done through a contract process. We did an RFP for that, and so that doesn't fall within the community grant program itself.
And so there was just one line item on here I wanted to ask a question about when you said it's at our discretion how we're going to spend any of these funds, and that's when we're looking at the Labor Day rodeo that's listed here. I'm looking at the amount requested, and it looks like I was actually surprised to see that the amount requested was what was given to them was only $2,500. That's correct? That's all they were seeking for their
this particular part of the event? That was all they requested for this particular piece of their event that was outlined in their application.
Okay. So I've got nothing concrete, but I just wanted to throw it before the council group here that at some point here, my hope was that we'd be able to have an outdoor community event that would possibly replace our Canada Day, which is lost due to COVID, and there's a chance that Labor Day might be that. And so I just wanted to throw out there and see what we thought about could Labor Day become that community event this year that replaces a Canada Day as a main get-together, outdoor get-together if health restrictions apply and allow us to do that. So I just wanted to hear from the group. Are we comfortable with what we're funding there, and any ideas about something to replace a Canada Day which got spoiled for us this year?
I can offer this, Councillor Wilson. I am in receipt of a letter from the Cochrane Lions Club asking for a financial assistance with Labor Day this year. So I passed that letter on to Ms. Knight. She is going to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Knight, but our process for that type of request would be that they come before council as a delegation with their idea and with the specific amount of finances that they're requesting so that we can make a decision on that. Similar to what we did a couple of years ago with the Ag Society. Ms. Knight, do you have anything to add that I may have forgotten or omitted?
That's the correct process, Mr. Mayor. They do, this program specifically, this policy only allows groups to request a maximum of $2,500 as long as their expected expenditures are going to be over that 5,000 threshold. So I am anticipating at this point more than one community group coming forward as delegations, looking for additional funding from council due to the COVID situation. Challenges in doing additional fundraising and things of that note that normally would be a significant part of their process for holding their events. Those will be coming forth in the next month or early September even for some groups. And so we will work with them to get them in front of council, but that money would not be able to come from this program because at this point council approved $60,000 for the community grant program, and this approval tonight would utilize the bulk of that money.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for the update. That's all that caught my eye in the list, and appreciate those thoughts, Mr. Mayor. That's good news all around.
Okay, great, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Padeco?
I also would support Councillor Wilson's request at it stepping up and helping the Lions Rodeo get their event kicked off to the best way that we absolutely could. I do realize that there would be extra funds available from CASE or from Cochrane Area Event Society from Canada Day. I don't know how that process goes because obviously we have provided them a grant money, so I'm not sure. I don't want to get into the weeds of where that goes, but I would be in support of allowing them to have extra funds to help them put off the best rodeo that they possibly could. And I know that they don't necessarily request a lot of money to put on their events, so I would love to help them out as much as we could. My question on the other side is, when it comes down to a new group, a new organization here in town, obviously things come up all the time. I mean, the last few years, we look at Big Hill Haven, we look at the Wine Glass Retreat. When it comes to these different areas, how do they know that they can apply for grants for funding? How are they advertised, I guess? And is there a way that we can help promote those as council to make sure that they, the organizations know that they should be applying when it comes down to events?
For this particular program, we do a lot of advertising on our social media pages, in the paper, to let people know that this program exists. All the links are on our websites. We generally don't promote ad hoc requests. Those generally come directly to us, because as part of your budgeting process, you do set aside certain dollars for the annual operating grants. You set aside a certain amount of dollars for this program. And with the budgets that we have, we don't set aside a pot of money for in case requests. Those will come, generally when we bring those forward to council, we work with the finance team to determine whether there are reserve funds that could be utilized and provide council with options when we know what these groups are looking for. And at times we have come forward and said there is no money available in this year's annual budget for this type of request, and then council can direct administration to pull funding where they determine they would like to pull it from.
Yeah, because I do believe that Councillor Wilson's whole point of this was not necessarily to make event groups or organizations have to work extra hard to have money, but more the fact that we have new groups starting up all the time, and that we want to make sure that we have funds to support them as well, right? And if we're always allocating the same amount of money to the same groups, to the same events, then it becomes very difficult for anybody else to be able to squeeze in because of the fact that we only have so much money in that pot. So I just want to remind council that, you know what, when we are looking down the list, I realize that this year, and as somebody who's planned events in the past, it's not going to be this year, it's going to be probably the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be very difficult for these guys to get sponsorship, but let's make sure that we're not forgetting the new groups and organizations that are coming forward, looking for a little bit of help. Than investing our money and always helping the same old, same old. I don't want to make it sound that they don't deserve that money either, but we do have other groups that we should be supporting or lending our support to show them that they are important to the town of Cochrane as well. That's all.
We were quite pleased this year, Councillor Verdego, that we did get some new groups that had not received funding, had not applied for funding specifically under this program this year. And so we're happy to be able to recommend supporting those as well.
Thanks, great to hear.
Okay, so I believe we have a motion on the floor by Councillor Flowers. Yes. Any other questions or comments on the recommended action and the motion on the floor? We'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Knight. Moving on to 6E, Mr. Hyman's coming back to give us a COVID update, the standing agenda item.
Good evening, Council. In terms of, we always start with the confirmed cases. I've got some great news for you this evening, and very happy to report that there's now 0 cases in the Cochrane, or 0 active cases in the Cochrane Springbank area. As you recall, since the onset of COVID, we've experienced 21 cases, and they are all now fully recovered. So that's some great news. I think it demonstrates the commitment of the community to stop the spread of the virus. And but I also want to clarify, I don't think that our work is done, but it is certainly some very good news for us on that front. In terms of the Eco Center, reopened last week, and we continue to see a significant number of residents bringing products to dispose of. While there's restrictions on what's being accepted, the community has been very responsive overall. I think there were 215 or 214 people the first day. I really want to commend our staff at this facility for making the adjustments, and there's been a huge demand over the last week, and they've really responded well. So I'm really proud of their response and their commitment to get that facility open and serving the public. Re-entry strategy. I just want to provide you a bit of an update. We're continuing to work on our re-entry strategy, which will mean bringing staff back into our facilities. As you know, a number of staff are back, and certainly in the operations department, but in the ranch house itself, we're exploring different scenarios on how we phase people back into the facilities while still maintaining the high level of service that we've got. Of course, we're going to ensure health and safety of our staff are our number one priority, and that we follow the guidelines set out by Alberta Health Services. We anticipate we've had all the managers work on their strategies and submit them to the senior leadership team. We received those on Friday, so this week we'll be looking through those and have a complete strategy ready in mid-June. Community events. This past weekend there were 2 community events that took place at the Spray Lakes Sawmills Family Sports Center. That being the Cochrane Farmers Market and the drive-in movie fundraiser. They're both tremendous events. I want to recognize Valerie McCracken and from the Farmers Market for her efforts. I talked to her this morning. They had over 1,000 people attend. This is a great event for our community, and it really brings people together. She commented on how it was a different experience being at Spray Lakes, but that it worked very well, and it's only going to get better throughout this summer, and happy to see that. Ryan Baum from the Rotary Young Professionals was responsible for, and his team was responsible for the drive-in movie fundraiser. Over 200 cars attended that. Heard some great things about it, so I want to commend Ryan for his efforts as well. And it's great to see these types of events being done responsibly with the restrictions that are in place, so we can keep those numbers exactly where they are in our community. I wanted to also provide you an update on the Ranch House Event Center. I think this is some great work by Christy Bell and her team. You might recall at the last meeting, Christy came and provided council with an update on the impact of COVID-19 on facility bookings and revenues. I'm pleased to inform you that, working with our ECC, they have approved the Ranch House to host micro events starting in July. So what this will actually allow us is to generate some revenue while still keeping within the guidelines. So again, Christy and her team have been very nimble. They've been following this throughout this process, and again, there'd probably be around 30 people maximum, and it would be for a shorter duration. But it does provide us the opportunity to reopen the facility in a limited capacity, and we're excited about this and just commend Christy and her team. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. As I said, I think we're in a good place, but there's still more work to do with respect to COVID, and appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Drew. It's good to hear we're starting to get some optimism back and get some people moving into some different directions of relaunch and re-entry. So thank you for that. Council, is there any questions of Mr. Heineman or a motion to accept his information at the very least? Is that your hand, Councillor Federico?
Yeah, I can make the motion that we accept Mr. Hyman's update for information for council.
Okay. Looks like you were thorough enough, Drew, that there are no questions for you tonight. So thanks for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Finance. Had a great deal of finance at the beginning of the meeting, and we'll end it off at the same note. Catherine, you're back.
I'm back. Okay, so now we have last 2 things. So I'll share my presentation with you. All right, so this is for council's consideration this evening is a property tax adjustment. And so the recommendation is that council reduce the 2020 taxes for Mr. John Robinson's property by $23,514.84. So what's some of the background information on that? Why are we asking council to approve this adjustment? Well, there was a road dedication, construction, and access agreement that was entered into with Mr. Robinson in September of 2017. And it was in order for us to facilitate the construction of James Walker Trail and Jack Tennant Memorial Bridge. The agreement included recognition that Mr. Robinson would have to relocate his gravel operations. So for a period of time, there might be a change in assessment where gravel operations, which has a higher tax rate than unimproved land. Anyway, so all of that to say, we've agreed with Mr. Robinson in this agreement that he wouldn't have to pay double taxes or extra taxes because we've asked him to relocate his gravel operations. So as a result of the calculations and given the tax rate that council passed earlier this evening, the adjustment that would be required to keep in line with the agreement is that $23,000 and change. And that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, this is following along exactly what we did last year and the year before. Yeah. Okay, council, any questions or a motion?
I'll make the motion that we follow the recommended action and continue the work that we've done on this.
Okay, I don't see any questions. Straightforward, same as last year. Call the question. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Catherine, for that one. And you have a similar item on 7B with the Vantage Land Corp.
Yeah, so with Vantage Land Corporation, I'll again share this presentation. So Vantage Land Corporation, just sort of the same thing, but this has to do with the land of the quarry. So we entered into an agreement. As a result of the agreement, we're looking for council to approve a tax adjustment of $69,340.91. And basically the background of this is that in 2010, we have a memorandum of understanding with the developer for the quarry that to try and encourage development of the land and so that it's taxed under sort of a brownfield status. And they get the sort of the beneficial status or a reduction in the taxes for up until they apply for a development permit. So most of the land has development permits on it. There just remains 2.25 acres. And that's across the street from the seniors' residence, just north of Walmart. That remains undeveloped and no development permit on it. So therefore, coming out of the agreement, we'd be looking for council to adjust the taxes by that $69,000, and that falls directly out of the tax rate, again, that council approved earlier this evening. Again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Similar to the previous item, this is a yearly thing that we update. Councillor McFadden, you have a question or a motion or both?
I will put the motion on the floor. I do have a question, and I certainly do understand that the sites that aren't being developed won't get taxed at that level. But the bike park piece, how does that fall into the equation? Is that now considered a developed piece of land?
I would have to defer to Mr. Weldon because I have no idea.
It's just an interesting project, and I was just wondering how it fit into the world.
Mr. Weldon, are you available at the podium to fill us in if you have the answer to that?
Sure, yeah. Sorry, it took me a little while to get to the podium here. No, this isn't included as part of the development, the developable land, because it is just a temporary location for this bike park. So it isn't included in this at this time.
Okay, no, that seems perfectly right to me. But excellent. Well, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Flowers, you have a question?
Yes, I'm just curious. At some point, do we start taxing some of these lands that are undeveloped? Does it encourage people to get them developed?
So the way the agreement reads right now is they would have to apply for a development permit, and until that time, then there's this tax break.
Okay, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, but as we've gone through time, this is every time that area develops something, it reverts to the new tax rate, and then we adjust down to the smaller piece. So really all what's left is the 2.25. So
yeah. So it was quite it was 44.5 acres to begin with. And when you think about the tax dollars that have been generated from the 42.25 acres that have developed, that's significantly more than would have happened if we hadn't entered into this agreement, one could argue, because it might have been a long time before a developer was prepared to come in and deal with this contaminated property and get it to a point where we actually now have taxable properties on there.
Yeah. Okay. That address your question, Councillor Flowers? Yeah. Okay. Councillor McFadden, you have another question?
Yeah, and just to highlight the value of it, Catherine, do you know off the top of your head of what the tax revenue generated from the site was this year?
None whatsoever, because it is a whole bunch of properties taxed individually, and I would have to go in and calculate all of those numbers. But, they're like, when you think about the square footage and the value of your Save-On-Foods and your Walmarts and your, the strip malls that are in there and Staples and Dollarama and everything else, I mean, you figure out what is the value of that type of building and how many buildings of that type. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars in tax revenue.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that that's what the win has always been, is to provide an incentive and remove some barriers for somebody looking to make something happen. And it was a significant strategy, but I think it's really paid off for them.
It really has. When you think about the millions of tax dollars we get a year from those properties that have been developed because of this agreement, and one could argue that it happened sooner and it might have happened later, but we are getting that money now compared to $69,000 a year. At the end of the day, I still feel that we're greatly better off than we would have been without it.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't see any other questions. My mind's in virtual mode now. Someone put the motion on the floor. That was Councillor McFadden. Thank you. All those in favor? And that carries as well. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the quick part of our agenda. Are there any notices of motion? Nope. Get to the mayor's report. I got a quick one. Drew touched on a couple of the events. I just wanted to talk quickly about the Young Professionals Drive-In movie. Did have an opportunity to help collect food at the entrance. Everybody was in a great mood. Everybody was smiling. There seemed to be positivity everywhere. It was a good event, well organized. I didn't see, they even had some overflow for people that didn't have a ticket, just in case. And then as they filled in everybody with tickets, they accommodated every single person that was there who wanted to see the movie in some fashion or other. So hats off to those young professionals at the Rotary Club for their first ever event. I thought it was a really, really good event. Seniors Week, I do need to make a proclamation that it is Seniors Week. And I think it actually already is happening. Councillor Federico and I'll leave that to your report, Councillor Federico, our involvement with Seniors Week so far. I also have a letter from Cochrane Area Events Society asking for council's endorsement in a letter for funding to the province for their New Year's Eve function. It's it's similar to what Councillor McFadden brought forward a couple of meetings ago, asking for an endorsement where we sign saying it's a good event and we would support them getting funding from the province. There's no commitment from anyone or any of the town funds, and I will happily sign that letter unless anybody wants to speak up in opposition of that, which I assume there wouldn't be, but we're bringing it forward in this fashion. Really starting to ramp up advocacy with the province, as I talked about in the priorities. We are, I think as a community in a position now more than ever to really try and attract more provincial and federal funding as it becomes available. With as any pandemic in history or world events such as both world wars, there's always been traditionally a series of stimulus packages that come from some form or level of government. Siri just thought I asked a question there. I would really think it's important for us to be just in line and ready to act whenever such a stimulus package comes our way, similar to the shovel-ready project list that we've already submitted. So there's been a great deal of work happening behind the scenes on that. CMRB, mid-sized cities, all of these things. I continue to meet with each of those organizations weekly. I have now set up a standard every 2-week meeting with our MLA to keep in contact. We've been, just by, happenstance, we've been really trying to get together over the last year or so since the provincial election, but I thought it was important to make a standing meeting to keep in contact as we move forward, especially under these COVID stages. So I had my first one of those last week with Peter Guthrie. And social and economic recovery task forces continue to move forward, and I'll let the other councillors who attend those fill you in on those committees. And that's my report for tonight. Are there any councillor reports to give? Councillor Reid?
Just trying to get my microphone adjusted there. Just to let the council know that the Spray Lakes Board met the Friday morning after our last marathon town council meeting, and sincerely appreciates just how difficult a decision that was for town council. What seems to got lost in the discussion, of course, is that town council only really had two choices: either to completely mothball the Spray Lakes facility and the Cochrane Arena until January of next year, which is kind of a full 8 months from now, at a cost of $700,000, or open the facilities as soon as possible at a cost of $1.5. So the Spray Lake Board really sincerely appreciates the financial support the town decided to provide and wishes to reassure town council and the community that these funds will not only cover the $500,000 lost revenue as a result of the pandemic from mid-March onward, but also will position the center and the arena for reopening, hopefully much sooner than we originally anticipated. The Spray Lakes facilities provide not only opportunities for enhancing of the well-being of our community, the physical, emotional, and psychological, I guess, but what we didn't talk about was the economic, right? It's probably one of the largest employers in town. So again, on behalf of the Spray Lakes Board, we very much want to appreciate the financial support town council provided, and looking forward to providing council with some positive monthly updates. So that would be my report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Flowers?
Thank you. Yes, the Social Recovery Task Force met again last week, and the survey that we're putting out is going to be very well done, in my opinion. So you'll be seeing it on Let's Talk Cochrane this week, and then hopefully next week there'll be a paper copy going in the Eagle, so that people that don't access the online service that will be able to still fill it out and send it in. So please encourage everyone to do that. And the other thing is the Elder Abuse Awareness Day is on June 15th. That's a week from today. They won't be holding all of the activities that they normally do, of course, but they still want to bring attention to the issue and really think about elder abuse these days with all the isolated people and some of the things that are going on. So I guess, Mayor, can you also proclaim Elder Abuse Awareness Day?
Yes. For June 15th, I believe you said, right?
Yes, we won't be having another meeting in the meantime, so a lilac tree will be planted in the community to remember the day, but it'll be a small gathering.
And I think you and I are slated to be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Flowers. Yeah, Social Recovery Task Force is up and running and doing some good work there. Can't wait to see some of the feedback. Councillor Padeco.
Yeah, I just wanted to give kudos to FCSS and actually all the town departments that were involved in the parade. You know, it was one of those opportunities that I was able to take my kids, which sometimes doesn't necessarily happen as a counselor. But it was great. They absolutely loved it. And I think my oldest daughter counted, there were probably, I think she said somewhere between 38 vehicles that were involved. And it was fantastic. Everybody was decorated. There were people shooting bubbles out of cars. There was music, there was honking. And there was a ton of people that came out to support it. So, you know what, well done, Town of Cochrane. I think it made a big difference. And it just is one of those other things that just raises our community spirit and our community togetherness. So I wanted to give kudos to all the town departments that were involved in that. There are a couple things that have come forward to me as a councillor and things that we probably haven't necessarily discussed that I think might warrant some discussion in behind the scenes. And that's obviously the Black Lives Matters movement. I've been approached by a couple of different community members wondering, you know, what is the town doing? Are we doing something? Can we proclaim something? I've had somebody say that they're willing to make, you know, vehicle decals and support, have money go towards a grant or supporting families in need. So it's something that definitely I think warrants discussion in behind the scenes, because I think it's something that's important to our community overall right now. And also with Pride Month. I've also been pinged about that and, you know, maybe what the town could do to support Pride for our LGBTQ2S plus community. So that's a whole mouthful. Anyways, those are two missions that I would love to see us kind of come up with some ideas for and support. But other than that, FCSS is meeting on Wednesday. We had to delay a meeting from a week ago, and CPC is meeting, I believe, Thursday afternoon early to discuss Western Heritage Guidelines and just give our feedback for that. So a couple of things going on, but all in all, things are good. And I will leave Councillor McFadden to talk about the Economic Recovery Task Force, so I don't take all the 2 minutes up.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. The Black Lives Matter movement, I've received a couple of letters about that myself just today, so we're responding to those as well. So, thank you for bringing that up. Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree. The Black Lives Matter and the upcoming Pride Month. It's like both. I think we need to make a kind of a deliberate choice in how we recognize and honor those movements, and they certainly, you know, I think touch a lot of people. It's led both conversations. Have led some really heartfelt discussions at my house and with friends and neighbors. And so I think there's certainly a role for us as leaders to take in that. So thank you for raising that. I'd like to do something there, but it's a difficult one. It's a tricky one. And I think perhaps what we can say in this age of disruption, that as it's as difficult and awkward and scary as it is, that hopefully we'll get to a better place as a community and as a culture. So it's a time of opportunity. And then on the opportunity, so on the Economic Recovery Task Force, I think we're into our 4th meeting last week. We received some preliminary information back on the survey we had conducted, trying to get more of an understanding of the state of the local economy and the state of local businesses. How many have been affected, what circumstances. So that's being gathered. Some really good input from different committee members outlining some of the bigger macro pictures that they understand. So I think the committee's starting to make some headway there. From my perspective, certainly, when it comes to the tools that we have as a municipality to impact the local economy, there's 2 tools really. There's some sort of financial investment, whether that's programs or breaks. But I don't think in either we can really make a huge difference. For me, the big tool, of course, is how we can adapt our planning and land use to make Cochrane the most competitive community it can be, and to make things easier for our local businesses to flex and adapt to this new COVID world. So some opportunities there that I'm looking to champion. And then the Parks and Recreation Committee is back at work again. We are adapting our work plan to the COVID situation, as some of the items on our work plan were pushed off in our budget adjustments. So we're adapting with that. I worked with Mr. Hyman on some suggestions there. And then I believe the next meeting we should see some recruitment of 2 new members to that committee. So it looks like our COVID hibernation experience, at least on my side of the workload, is done. It's certainly been a busy time as we transition from dealing with an emergency to kind of getting back to planning for the future. So it's been a busy time, and so many things to be proud of in this town with how people have adapted and promoted and found new ways to bring the community together. So good times, challenging times, and times of opportunity.
Yeah, it sure is. Councillor Flowers, you have another comment?
Just a final comment, Black Lives Matter. I did see on Facebook there's some community residents looking at putting together a march or a walk or a rally, I don't know what you call it, on Sunday. So you might see something happening around that. Maybe we could participate.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, is there any other reports or comments? Not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Nagel, there you go. Nice haircut, by the way. COVID cut going on. Just need your microphone.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Thank you for the haircut compliment. Just while we're making comments about stuff going on in the community, I noticed in the media that the welcome wagon looks like it's coming to a close. I was hoping at some point we could have a discussion about maybe our economic development department continuing that great work. I think it's such a nice touch. It's so great when people come to the community, and the first thing they get is this really great welcoming package. And I think it really makes Cochrane feel like a special place when you move here. It must not be very great to move to a brand new community, not have anybody recognize it in any way. And I think that special recognition is a really nice feature. That's for a further discussion in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw that as well. I just happened to see those people at our, there was a function just before COVID, and they were so excited for the year to come. It's too bad to see them. Councillor Federico, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I actually think that there is somebody looking to take that over or rally for it. So I don't think it's going to be the end of the welcome wagon. I think that there is somebody independent that's looking at stepping up. So maybe we can definitely support them. Councillor Nagel, I do agree with you. I don't want to see it go to the wayside, but I don't think it's necessarily something that we need to get involved in. If there's somebody already coming forward to want to take that over and be a part of it, I'd rather show them the support. So, but good point.
Okay. Thank you. That's everybody's report for tonight. We don't have anything in camera. The only thing left is lucky number 13, and that's adjournment. So this meeting is terminated. Thanks everyone for tonight.